What's crackin', big dogs? Episode 13 of Get Real with Casey Kasem was a fun one. I was talking with Nick Ercolano of BDGE, or Big Dogs Gotta Eat. He's a brilliant marketing and business mind who also puts out rad fantasy content while just having a blast. We talked about what he's learned being a business mind, his interview series, building up his friends, and the live draft with his subscribers, plus much more. This interview was done the night before Christmas Eve, so we went a little long knowing that I had the next day off, and also because Nick has such a magical mind. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Nick_BDGE and check out all his stuff over with BigDogsFantasy.com. You can also catch his videos on the BDGE YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter at DCaseyKasem. You can follow the pod on Twitter at GetReal_pod. Make sure you check out my writing with the fantasy footballers. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP Network. Make sure you subscribe to them. Check out all the pods on the network. Oh, and there's also a new Get Real t-shirt available at ffpodshirts.storenvy.com. And with that, I bring you my interview with Nick Ercolano. Hello.
Yo, Casey.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, this looks crystal clear.
Well, I was really excited to get you on here because I knew of you, but at least two people have brought you up already on this podcast. So I thought, well, I might as well talk to the guy himself. So
yeah, these are my favorite like types of shows to come on. They're not, they're kind of few and far between in our industry, but like whenever I jump onto a fantasy podcast, a lot of them now, I guess, kind of start off with questions like in this kind of territory. Like, yeah, it would be kind of cool if we just, stuck with this topic for the entirety of the video or podcast, and we never really went into fantasy football. Like, I'd be totally down for that. And sometimes I kind of string them along for like the hour. We don't touch on any football players, and I'm like, this is beautiful. Let's just do this every time. But other times we get sucked into fantasy football, and I'm like, okay, I guess that's why I'm here, right?
Well, it's nice to have a nice balance. But yeah, on here, I just like talking because everybody who I've gotten feedback from so far has been like, wow, it's really cool that I got to know somebody that I really don't know that much about. Because I've had, Matt Harmon was on, and I've had Andy Behrens and Charch and everything. And it's like these bigger guys in the industry to be able to hear, stories that you didn't know about and all this other stuff and how they came up just like, you and me and everybody else. It's pretty rad to hear.
Yeah, everyone is coming up in different ways, and it's fun to talk to people in the industry that are from the younger generation, from the older generation, because I think most of the people that we kind of look up to that are like the older heads in a sense of the generation kind of came through blogging and now podcasting, and we're seeing a bunch of different like social platforms become kind of the mainstay or the ones that have the most like reach, the most organic growth through them. So it's been fun to see and operate through, seeing where people are going to start pivoting their concentration and their attention to, and some people are like stagnant. They're like, I like what I'm doing here. But, eventually that will play itself out in a couple of years. So it's fun to get a grasp of like where people have come from and where they plan on going in the future. For
sure. I mean, the landscape is changing, like you said, and talking to the guys who had to have people call their answer machines and leave their lineups and all that stuff has been really rad, because it's like, I mean, wow, you can have this be a long lasting, career if you really, really put your all into it. And you haven't always been like focused on fantasy football. There's been obviously a life before fantasy football. Can you go back to not even work in general, but go back to your younger years when you started playing fantasy football? Exactly how did you get started in all of that?
Yeah, I think I don't know what made me start playing fantasy football. It might have been, I'm a Falcons fan. I live in New York. I'm a Falcons fan. So like one of the most frequently asked questions, like, why are you a Falcons fan? And I was probably like 11 or 12 maybe when Mike Vick came in the league, and he was obviously one of the most like polarizing figures, and he had gotten me like addicted to football and just watching him in general. He was like one of the coolest athletes that come around in a long time. So I had gotten so fond of of what he was doing. I became such a fan of him that I became a fan of the Atlanta Falcons. And this is could completely be like untrue, but I probably got into fantasy football based on him. And me and my friends started playing. I remember we'd like ride bikes around our town all day, and then we'd pop up at the library later on, and we'd be like, yo, let's do some like fantasy football drafts. We go on Yahoo and we do whether it was mock drafts or we join real drafts and stuff. And now I think about it, and you know how like when people do waiver wires nowadays and they're like, oh, this player is unowned in like 60% of Yahoo leagues. And you're like, that's ridiculous. Like that player shouldn't be on the wire. I kind of start to think back of like when we were kids, it was because people like us who would join 50 leagues when they're 12 years old and then they don't actually play the league out or anything. We just did it for the draft. I remember being like, I just want Michael Vick. I just want Priest Holmes. I just want these guys on my team. Would do like 1 or 2 rounds of like a real league and then let the thing fly. So started like probably when I was like 11, 12, 13, not really sure why I got into it, to be honest. And then from there, we had like one real league that me and my friends from middle school, high school were really into. And we still, one of the shows that we put out weekly is like following along and documenting that entire league. And that league has kind of grown in and of itself. And I like thought when I was younger, I was like, oh, I won like 3 of the first 5 years. And I was like, yeah, I'm like good at fantasy football. Let me like start helping people out or whatever. So I started doing my own blog and things that was, probably started like 10 years ago and things have kind of evolved since then. But that's the quick, like, fantasy football starting point of it all, I guess.
So you're talking about how you like the draft portion of it. Are you a fan of DFS or best ball or both?
So DFS, I don't play DFS at all. To be honest with you, like I really enjoy season long still. Me and my friends were actually having this conversation yesterday. I'm like, dude, I'm still, even as we're putting out a lot more dynasty content and I'm in a bunch of dynasty leagues myself and it's become like a game that I actually really enjoy. I am still like really, really excited about season long. I still think it's like the reason I play fantasy football because of the engagement within season long leagues and like what surrounds that, the actual product of what season long is. I don't play DFS. It just, you know what it is? Like, I don't know. I'm not in this for, it's probably saying this the wrong way, but like DFS is like, it is really gambling when you think about it. Like, I don't care about like the whole like government and whatever we can curse on here, right?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I don't give a fuck like what like people break down the government versus whatever it is. I'm just like, I don't know. DFS doesn't really excite me because you're getting into it to like try to make money. And it's like, dude, the best players in DFS might win like 55% of the time, but at the end of the day, like your algorithm is not better than this person's lineup DFS optimizer. And I'm just like, dude, I feel like it's like a bunch of bullshit just being sold in that industry. And I'm just like, it's not fun for me, so I'm not really about it,
No, I totally get that as well. Like there's certain types of leagues that I'm just not a fan of as well. So I've tried to do a little bit more DFS this season just because I've been bored and at home. But I think in a normal, year, I'm not doing as much. I'm not winning any money anyway. So I'm just kind of doing,
like, I'm just like, does it actually take any skill to win DFS or like, are the people that are winning the Millie Makers, like just putting in a lucky lineup? And I'm just like, I don't know. People waste so much time like diving into DFS and those numbers and stuff. I'm like, I really kind of feel not that it's a waste of time if you enjoy doing it, but the way people hype it up to be in this industry where it's like this money making machine and there's really like edges to be had here. I'm just like, I don't really buy into that shit. It's not really me. I mean, it's not everything's not for everybody, obviously, but that's
exactly. Yeah. I mean, I had TJ Hernandez on here and he's a big DFS guy. And I mean, he used to play poker, online poker before that was shut down. Then he switched over to DFS. So, and he enjoys it and, it gets him enough money. So more power to him as well. You know,
people who could like make an actual living off DFS.
Yeah.
Although I don't think I believe most of the people that say they make a living off DFS, but if you can, that's like wildly impressive to me. And there is probably some kind of connect between like poker players and DFS players. They probably come from some kind of like natural same, I don't know, consciousness or whatever, that's a game that I think is tantalizing to probably both of those parties. So there's probably way more credit to be given there than I'm giving to it, but just, I don't know, I guess not my cup of tea.
Well, that kind of transitions me to this question about talking about YouTube, which seems like it doesn't have anything to do with that, but it does because the transition here is the reason he started playing. Doing DFS instead of playing poker is because poker got shut down. So he didn't have that source of revenue anymore. He didn't have that thing to go to. And now YouTube, I hear a lot of YouTubers complain about monetization and all of that, how YouTube is changing and all of these things. Do you think it's going to become a thing where one day YouTube isn't going to be pulling in as many people as it is at the moment?
So wait, what do you mean? Like YouTube is going to be
like not that it's going to go away, but do you think that there's going to be something else that comes and like takes over and takes?
It's a good question. I feel like and it might be a naive answer because I'm probably biased towards YouTube because that's kind of
Right.
like where I built my
Hey.
platform from. But YouTube feels like very powerful in a sense that it really has a grasp on long form video content, right? Like these other platforms where it's like, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, they're all kind of fighting with each other for video content because they all have a limit of like a minute, 2 minutes, whatever.
Right.
And you're slowly starting to see like Instagram, they're letting you upload IGTVs that are 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and Twitter, like sometimes you can get an upload length kind of extended there. But like YouTube is long form video, like there isn't a platform that's actually competing with them. So for now, like maybe 5 years down the line, they will have a competitor there. But I feel like YouTube's in a really, really good spot as far as where they fit into the ecosystem of video.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot more YouTube channels than normal. I'm not supposed to have my phone on at work, and that's why podcasts are pretty easy to listen to. But yeah, the YouTube, I know like the fantasy footballers, they're in the YouTube game, and there's a lot of new channels that have popped up recently. Why do you think, we'll get to you in YouTube in general in a minute, but why do you think that YouTube took hold of fantasy football so quickly and really ran with it?
Because that's just where people are. I mean, that's where the organic growth is. Like fantasy football exploded on Twitter, but people aren't really on Twitter anymore. Like, I mean, there obviously are a lot of people on Twitter, but you can't really organically find many people on Twitter through industries like this unless you're like really actively searching for it. There's just not, you go onto like a podcast, you go onto iTunes podcast or whatever, you're not really organically finding anybody. Like their search system is not good. It's like whoever is at the top ranked parts of these fantasy or niche podcast avenues, like those are the people that are going to stay there. It's not good for growing. But YouTube is, I mean, at the end of the day, YouTube is owned by Google, right? They're a search platform, so it's like they want to give you what you're looking for. And if you type in fantasy football, you're going to come across a bunch of different channels, and like people go onto YouTube searching for these things. Like you don't go onto Twitter searching for new information. You kind of just go there to like mindlessly scroll. But you go on YouTube and you're looking for like fantasy football rankings, fantasy football this or whatever. They're going to give you a bunch of options. And there's just so many people there at all times. And on the flip side, it's like a supply and demand thing. So for a long time, there weren't a lot of fantasy football creators, content creators. So it's like you have this influx of this industry that's getting wildly popular at a crazy, crazy pace. And you have people, the audience getting really, really big, looking for content to consume. And then you have this giant platform in YouTube where there's like 5 creators on it. So you got people jumping on there. You got 5 million people looking for content. You've got 5 people making content. You do the math, those people are going to grow really, really quickly. So that's why, I mean, YouTube just, the search is still, that's why you're seeing all the brands make YouTube like a very, very big pillar of their content now, because you're just seeing the organic reach, like the organic search, the organic traffic and volume that you're getting in subscribers and stuff is getting noticed by the big brands. So they all start to pivot over there. Eventually it'll get too saturated and we're all going to need to find a new platform to do that with,
Yeah. As most jobs, people get, pushed out all the time. My question to go with YouTube, with the algorithm of YouTube and how you guys will pop up, like the suggested videos or whatever, because you watch this channel, people watch this channel. How exactly does that work?
For someone that like really likes YouTube and does a lot of YouTube stuff, I don't focus myself on like those types of tactics. And I don't want to say gimmicks because they're obviously important. I focus on like making stuff that I really enjoy making, like making content that I like have fun doing, and like the thumbnail's really important. Obviously the titles are important, but I can't really sit here and tell you like this works better than this or this works like that because of X, Y, Z. I think one of the things that I've found really helpful is like looking at other channels. Like I'm not like too, into myself to be like, oh, like this fantasy football channel is really good at doing thumbnails. Like what is it about their thumbnail that I think attracts people, or what do I personally like about it? Like why is this video per se doing really big numbers as opposed to this one? I'm like, oh, the title is like really intriguing. Let me try to do like a playoff or a spinoff of that. So I think it's a little bit of like doing your own research. The algorithm kind of works in its own right. And I really just don't like to spend time or energy on shit that I feel like I'm never really going to be able to figure out anyways. I feel like you do the right thing. You have good intent, you work hard, and like the results will come at the end of it.
For sure. And if you put in the work, I mean, you're going to show up in people's algorithms all over the place. So you're
Exactly.
going to get more viewers that way as well. So before you started doing your fantasy football content, what were you doing for a living? How were you living your, everyday, got to go to work kind of life?
So I want to say I want to say I started fantasy football blogging like while I was still in college, maybe, or maybe like right after I left college. And the first job I had was at a typical like business entry level position. I'd gone to school undergrad for business stuff, and the first business job I think I had was like very administrative, like lower level stuff that wasn't creative or whatever. And I jumped around a few full time jobs by the time I was like 22 or 23, like right out of college. I just like there was a lot of shit that I didn't like. I was just like, this is not for me. It's not going to be long term. I want more. I want more. I didn't know what I wanted, but I wanted more. And I eventually landed at a marketing agency. I grew up in New Jersey, and the agency was a couple miles away from where I lived in New Jersey. And I was there for probably like 8 months, and I had gotten into like a more creative role there. And I was like, oh, this is like really, this is intriguing to me. Like this is fun, the marketing side of things, because this is when, this is probably like 6-7-ish years ago when Facebook and Instagram were just getting on the map in terms of like sponsored posts and like really social media becoming a big priority of companies and brands and stuff. So I had kind of been put on a team where I was running like Facebook ads, the sponsored posts going down your feed and stuff for some of the clients at the marketing agency. And I had like absolutely no fucking idea what I was doing on those campaigns. I was like very young, and they're like, we want you to run these. And I was like, okay, like I get it. Like I'm on Facebook, but I don't really know anything about campaign spending. I don't know about like targeting on those platforms. I don't know anything at this point. So I was doing that. I was in marketing, right? That had always been my passion. That will always be my passion. But I had started blogging fantasy stuff. I realized quickly that I'm like, I don't like writing. I'm not a big writer.
Yeah.
And I started doing video. And again, that was not from basically, to where I started this video off with, where I was talking about like, or this podcast off with, there was not a lot of content creators on YouTube. That was not my mindset. My mindset was legitimately like, I'm better on video. I'm better on camera. I'm better on audio recording myself. So I'm just going to switch to a video platform. And the only one I knew at the time was YouTube. I was like, oh, it's kind of cool that no one's really posting on here. So like the organic growth, although I wasn't taking it seriously and I was doing it like really, really, one video here and a video a month from now is like, oh, I'd have like 500 subscribers by the end of the summer. I'm like, that's ridiculous for the amount of work that I'm not putting in. So I had been doing some of the organic stuff, like my videos, but I was working in the marketing field. I eventually jumped over to an agency in New York City. And by that point, things had started to scale up a little bit. I was writing for some different blogs. I was posting video content more regularly. And I had gotten to the point where I want to say like I had not like a ton of subscribers, maybe like 5,000-ish subscribers. And I started to like use some of the tactics that I had learned like in the real marketing world. At this point I had been in it for like 2 or 3 years, and I started to like monetize some of the things that I was doing, and the organic growth continued to go. The more work I put into it, the more growth we had. And I was like, yo, this is kind of like a gold mine right now. Like there are still, these companies and brands are still not hopping onto YouTube. So I have probably this I have videos probably saying this 2 to 3 years ago. I'm like, there's a 2 to 3 year window that I'm going to have to be able to put out as much content as I want before all the brands start like hopping in. So I did that. I worked really hard. And eventually the last agency I was at, I found myself like sitting in the kitchen of the marketing agency, like on my laptop, away from everybody, just working on my own shit. I was like, working on my website, like doing blog posts, like doing my own stuff. And I was like, this is ridiculous that I'm sitting here 8 hours a day working on somebody else's shit when I want to do my own stuff. So I eventually, I remember like I called my best friend. I was commuting home from work one day. I was like, I think I'm going to leave my job in like 2 to 3 months and like really just chase after whatever. And at the time I didn't really have a plan. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I knew that this would work, but I didn't know like how or how long it would take or whatever. Like I'm going to leave my job in like 2 to 3 months probably, because it was there. There's just, I was like suffocating at the job. I was like, I know what I want. I know what I want to chase after. I'm super passionate about this. I'm going to leave. And like, the next day I just walked in and I was like, I'm out. Like I didn't wait the 2 to 3 months. I walked right into my boss's office. I was like, I'm sorry. Like, I love you guys. Like, this has been a really fun experience. I love marketing, but like, I got to do my own thing. It was cool. My boss was like super supportive of it. I left, and I had basically what I had done. I took my experience in the marketing world doing Facebook and Instagram sponsored campaigns. And that was how I would make money for the next year or 2 years. running those campaigns for like small, medium-sized businesses that needed them, needed them done, but didn't know how to do it themselves. So that freed up flexibility. I didn't have to commute into Manhattan, every day. I didn't have to do all this other shit with work. So it freed up flexibility. It freed up time. It freed up a lot of things for me to be more creative on the content side of things. So chasing after the content while doing like freelancing marketing on the side. So money was not really coming in through fantasy yet. And I just kind of had to keep grinding it out until like the two worlds collided and content could kind of take over the entirety of what I was doing.
And that's totally dope. I know that on your YouTube channel, you've got old videos from back when you first started, when you were kind of showing the process that you went through in order to get where you are now. Why did you think it was important to document that and show that to everybody that was subscribed to your channel or that just like hopped in because of the random algorithm?
I still think about that to this day. Like, I don't know. I think I did it for a few reasons. I think I did it for myself. One, maybe to hold myself accountable. I did it for, I think I just always believed in what I was doing, like really, really wholeheartedly. And I was like, this would be really just cool to document, like me being able to look back 5 years from now and being like, this is where I started. Like, this is how I did it. And I think I also did it because I wanted people to know that, you could completely be yourself and also be successful. Like we've had, luckily, like in the last like 3-5 years, we've had this like big wave in terms of like content creation that like people are being way more open and transparent and like truthful and authentic to like who they are. And that inspires people, right? Like when you see people like you and me, like being their true authentic, like I can curse on here and it's not a big, it's not a big deal. Like you see that and you're like, oh, like I'm like that person. And that person is successful. So I can also be myself and be successful. So I kind of saw myself as like the person I needed to see when I was growing up. Like I wish I had seen, like when I'm 18, I wish I had seen like 28-year-old Nick, like telling me that it's okay to do X, Y, Z. It's okay to fuck up. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to do all these things. That would make my life a lot easier. So it's a combination of shit that I feel like was just super important. And it's just something I felt like I needed to do. I don't really know why, I guess.
No, I mean, that's totally cool because you see guys like, Mike from the Fantasy Footballers, or you see Matt Harmon, who's just, being himself and stuff. And you're like, wow, that's just like a normal dude. So yeah, I totally get that. Like you want to see that representation. You want to be able to be like, I can relate to that person.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's really cool to see you grow how you've grown and then be where you are and be like, that's just a normal dude. So
yeah. I think like really a lot of my audience too is like 20. Actually, I it's really weird. I have like an uncomfortable amount of like 16 to 22-year-old guys in my audience that call me dad. And I'm just like, I don't know where I must have said something.
Oh man,
made some kind of fucking comment in one of my videos one time, and like they just don't stop. Like they're just like, good morning, dad. Like every fucking comment is something like that. But I have a lot of kids that are like the age that I was when I started this stuff. So, I want them to understand that one, it's good to be yourself, but like also like let you know that I'm putting the fucking work in and I've been doing it for like seven years. Like this shit is not overnight, So it's just like it's like, I guess it's an inspirational thing, but the point was not really to be inspirational. It was just to show, what it actually takes.
Yeah. And it is freaking inspirational because of the age that you are, the age that you were when you started doing all this stuff. Most people your age aren't really that focused on the business aspect of, wanting to start something from the ground up and this focusing on that, putting in the time and the effort. What made you decide that Big Dogs Gotta Eat was going to be something that you wanted to put your focus on?
There wasn't like a click factor. There wasn't anything that was like, I'm going to start a business today, or this is what I'm going to chase after. It was a gradual thing over like years of testing things out, of being like, this is, something I tend to say a lot is like, you figure out what you don't like way quicker than like what you do actually want, because like we're told from a young age that you have to kind of know, what you want, where your life is going to go, pick your major, pick your job when you're this old. But it's way easier to eliminate shit. It's like when you're 16, just tell me what you don't like, and we can start putting you down the right path of shit that like might be, in your batter's box, So I think like I just did a lot of shit when I was young. Like if, again, going back to the different jobs I had, if I was at a job full time. I don't care if I signed a 2-year contract. If I hated it by the 3rd week, like I'm out of there. You know, it's not doing anyone a favor for me to stay work at a place that I hate the employer of, and you know, it's just bad negative energy from both sides. So it's like it's this combination of figuring out what you don't like really quickly, and then eventually, like, it'll naturally, I think, kind of your world will come into focus when you start putting your energy towards things you like. And that's what I'm doing right now is a collection of filtering out shit I don't like. And I eventually kind of found my pitch with content creation. I think that the vlogging stuff and video, this was just one of the ways that I found myself most comfortably expressing myself. You know, I was not like someone that was very good expressing myself like growing up and like really being vulnerable, but for some reason, like when I turn on the cameras, I'm just like good to go all the time. You know, I'm like very open about shit, and I don't have trouble of doing that, and that just felt so natural to me. And I'm like, this is probably what I'm gonna be doing, you know, forever. And with Big Dogs, it's like, again, it wasn't like a black or white thing where it's like, okay, we're a business now, we're not a business now, we don't box ourselves in. Like tomorrow, I might stop doing fucking videos because I don't feel like doing it. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just it's a whole bunch of combination of shit I don't like and do like, kind of joining forces.
And you were talking about like maybe tomorrow you're not going to do fantasy. Is that why you decided that on your YouTube channel you were going to go by your name and not Fantasy Football Channel or whatever else?
100%. Yeah, I think I think that is definitely the reasoning why. And I think one of the biggest mistakes a lot of people, specifically in fantasy, do is they box themselves into what they think they should be, or you know, the content that they think they should be making, which I think is a huge mistake. Not necessarily from like a content or like a branding perspective, but for a mental thing. Like once you put yourself in your own box of like, I have to do this or I have to do this, you really fuck yourself in the long run. You really do, because then you have this built up, like you're going to burn out because you're like, oh, I want to do this, but I have to keep pushing myself to do shit that I promised myself to do a year ago, but I don't enjoy doing it anymore, you know? So the brand that I want to say that we're building right now, I like to call it a lifestyle brand in the sense that like anything that I'm passionate about in life will be in my content, you know, like I don't care if it's so far out of what you're used to seeing on my channel or from me, but that's the stuff that if I enjoy doing it, like that's what you're going to get from me. So if you enjoy like the passion that you're getting from me from fantasy, you're probably going to enjoy it in marketing and business and branding and nutrition and fitness and tech and whatever the fuck I end up wanting to put out on video. You know what I mean? So I think, I think that's a big mistake of people because it hurts them personally, because they put themselves in a box and then they feel like they can't do what makes them happy.
And doing a YouTube channel and using your name, it's probably easier to do that than it is, you know, if you were writing for a fantasy football site. So
it's been a little bit, no, it's okay. I think I know where you're going with that.
Yeah,
I think it's been a little bit difficult as we're growing, because we're starting to build a little bit of a team. Like I have, 4 or 5 other content creators. We have a couple like editors and things like that. And with my name on it, it's like the company's name or the brand's name is not Nick Ercolano, obviously. It's, Big Dogs Gotta Eat. And when people search that, like that's my name comes up. And it's like, okay, if we want to expand, I obviously know I can't do this all by myself. And that was a big focus this year. So a couple of the shows that we do on my channel, we did branch off, and I gave I do a video with 2 of my friends on Wednesdays and another video with 2 separate friends on Thursdays. And I'm like, yo, I want to pivot off and kind of like create our own like podcast network in a sense. Like everything is under Big Dogs still, like anything we put out, whether it's a different podcast or a new video channel or whatever. But we made separate YouTube channels for those, and we made separate podcasts for those, because it did, like, as you start to scale, it gets a little bit difficult with the name being the brand and everything. So that has been something that I've kind of wrestled with and like had to navigate and figure out like kind of what I'm doing here. So I'm definitely not an expert on it by any means, but like I'm trying my best to try to figure out the avenues that way. We're live, baby.
We're live. Sorry about that. That was intermission because, we might go a while. No, I don't usually go.
Dude, go. You got my complete time, focus, attention, and energy.
And I appreciate that. That brings me to this kind of, do you think that when you're putting out a podcast or you're doing like a video or whatever, that there should be a time frame that you like say, hey, this is good enough, you know, you don't want to go too much because people aren't going to listen to it or whatever? Or do you think that you can keep going because you've got an audience, so they're going to listen to what you have to say?
Yeah, that actually goes right back to kind of the last question, or the two, whatever it is, about putting yourself in that box. Is like whatever I feel most comfortable with, like whatever I want to do. I get tons of when I first started my YouTube channel, my videos were almost like 60 minutes long. So they would go for a long time. It was just me doing solo videos. So I would be talking forever. And still to this day, like I've cut them down pretty significantly, probably because I have more on my plate. So I don't really have time to do 60-minute videos anymore and the research stuff. But I get a lot of comments still, like, cut these videos down to 4 minutes to 6 minutes. No one wants to watch a 30-minute video. And like, I'll just comment under, I'll be like, fuck off. Like, you know,
Yeah,
like,
right.
look, I don't care. Like, I do what I want, whatever feels
Right.
most comfortable to me. And I'm not like, I can't like do analysis on a player and just do it in like 2 minutes. Like, I need to be able to break down, you know, the way I break it down. So I don't, that's another thing, like going back to the algorithms, like people think they know, it's like, oh, this is best, this is best for this. I'm just like, I'm just going to put out the content that's best from me and that I think I did the best on and what's most comfortable for me. So like length, there's never been a piece of content I put out that's like, oh, we need to focus on like this being shorter or longer, unless obviously like the platform itself has a time constraint.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And if they're fans, quote unquote fans of yours, you know, your following is going to listen. You
Right.
know, sometimes people, you know, fast forward or put it on 1.5 speed or whatever, but they're gonna see what they want, and you're gonna get that fan base to come over.
But yeah, if you got like true
yeah.
fans, they'll listen to your shit for like 6 hours. Like you know,
For
people
real.
binge content all the time. Doesn't matter if it's 1 episode or 6 episodes. It's like if they like what you're doing. If you're a good content creator, they're gonna come around for forever. You know.
That's exactly right. And I wanted to go back. I wanted to touch just briefly, or we can just talk about it forever because this is a really interesting question for me, but it has to do with the name of your brand. How did that come about? Because I was talking with Peter Howard on one of the episodes earlier, and he was talking about it, and he's like, I really don't know what it stands for exactly or what it means. So
Yeah. So Big Dog's Gotta Eat. This is comes from my time in college. So we had, at the end of my 4 years at college, we had what we had called senior week. It was the last week of college where we had graduation was at the end of it. So I think we had graduation on like Friday, but the days leading up to it were like organized by the senior class. And it was like one day of a beer Olympics, one day of a bar crawl, one day of like a house party crawl, like typical like college nonsense shit, right, for the week. Right. And we had the beer Olympics was this huge beer Olympics where you had a team of like 7 or 8 people. And my team, it was, I think 84 teams competed in the beer Olympics, and we ended up getting down to the finals. So we were like the last 2 teams left of the 84. And at this point we're like, you know, we're fucked up. We're wasted. We're just like chugging beers down the line and shit. And we had the last game we played was a boat race. So you get like your 5 best people at chugging, the other team's 5 best people at chugging. For some reason, like I was really good at chugging beers in college. So they put me at the anchor, and I was the last person in the beer race, and we're like competing in the finals, and it gets down to me, and we beat the other team. I chugged the beer faster than whoever the anchor was. And like, for some reason, when I put my beer down, like I yelled out like Big Dog's Gotta Eat. Like that was like a phrase. Right. And like my whole team started yelling, excuse me. So we were like, Big Dog's Gotta Eat. We were, hoo, hoo, hoo. We started like doing it. It became like our slogan for the day after we just won this like 84 team beer Olympics. And I thought about that. And like at that time I hadn't started doing like content creation or anything like that.
Yeah. But
it was just like a really good memory in my mind. And when the time came when I had to think of like what I wanted to name this brand or what I wanted to do with it, you know, there's all like the roto worlds and the fantasy football, this and all that kind of shit that I feel like kind of falls into the same bubble. So I was thinking of names. I was like, what kind of encapsulates what I want people to take away or think of with this brand? And when I think of Big Dog's Gotta Eat, like that was the first thing that popped in my head. I'm like, oh, this is kind of like a funny personal anecdote. Like this is something that I think about and like have a good personal experience when I think about the name. But also when I think of like Big Dogs, I'm thinking of the people that want more, that are not afraid to like chase after their passions and work hard at things that are a little bit outside of the box. Right. And when I say like Big Dogs, like those are the people I'm thinking of, the ones that are okay taking the step, whether it's outside of the norm or like really putting themselves out there and being vulnerable. And Gotta Eat, the second part is just like those people are the ones that are going to succeed, right? Those are the people that are going to get more out of life. So when I say Big Dogs Gotta Eat, it's kind of from like a business sense, but it's kind of from like a sense of like fuckery as well. So there's multiple parts to it, but that's kind of where it comes from.
And how important is it to have have a name that sets yourself apart from all the other places? Because like I write for a site called Fighting Chance, and it's a fantasy football website. It's fantasy sports, but like it's cool because if you were to open it up to other stuff, you could. So how important is it to have that? So it's not like, is it Roto World or is it Roto whatever or Roto whatever?
I guess I can't say it's that important because you could look at many. You could look at many. It's only important if it's important to you. That's right. I guess that's the way I would put it. Because you could look at like another site, the fantasy footballers, right? Yeah. Like that is the very generic, like that is, anyone could have thought of that name, but that is like the name now, and they are wildly successful. So like, who am I to sit here and be like, that's stupid? You know what I mean? Because they've been so fucking good with branding it and making it their thing and making it a huge thing. So like, I think it's as important as you want it to be,
Right. I didn't actually think of it that way, but that is a really awesome point. And how important do you think a logo is? So, because I know that the fantasy footballers have a really cool logo, and I know that your logo is one where I saw it and I was like, holy crap, that's like so beautiful.
Do you like it?
My gosh, I love it.
Really? I kind of think it's like a piece of shit logo, but I love that. To me, it's endearing. Yeah, it's like endearing to me.
I like something like that that's minimalistic, gets to the point, but it's like still there's a creativity in there, and you can see that. So
the importance of the logo to me is like completely honest. I think it doesn't matter at all. I think I think the story you tell of what you are, your brand and your content, like the consistency and the work that you put in over the years is what's going to have the meaning behind the logo. The logo itself, I think like websites, I think business cards, technology, all this shit is a waste of time for most people starting off. I think they use it as like excuses for why they're not creating and why they're not moving quickly and XYZ. So those kind of things I don't necessarily think are important whatsoever. I think they're like important looking back, like because people will know what you are based on that. But at the beginning, which is what I think people get wrong, they think it matters from the start. It doesn't. It only matters when you don't think it matters anymore, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. I'm learning here because I don't own my own anything. So I'm kind of just, here. But I know that some people feel like if you're trying to brand yourself, that if you want to put out merchandise, because I see a lot of fantasy football podcast websites putting out merch now. And I know that's one of the revenues, especially during, COVID and everything else, to help out with that. But do you think that merchandise, if you get to a point where you have a big following, that merchandise is a road that you should look at?
Yes. And yes, I would say here's the thing, like fantasy is an interesting space. There are a lot of content creators. I would say YouTubers in general, people that use like their physical appearance as some kind of value prop to the audience, make a ton on merch. Like that's their, if it really goes, what I think it goes to is, what's the value prop you're giving off to your audience, right? In fantasy football, most people's value props, 99.9% of the people in the industry's value props is informational, right? Like people follow you for fantasy information. If you're someone who, like for instance, like Barstool Sports, right? People follow them. This is not like I love them. You need to love their content or whatever. People follow them because they could be entertaining to their niche, right? Their value prop is entertainment. It's not information. People aren't like, I need to know what the news is saying. Like I need information. If your value prop is entertainment, I think merch is probably the single best like monetization source for you. We're in an industry where like information is the value prop. Thus, you see most companies monetizing through an information product. Most people aren't dying to buy your merch. It's a cool thing for people to have your merch, but even as someone, I consider like my brand to be like one of the stronger ones on the side of like, I guess like entertainment value in a sense. I don't mean to sound like, like narcissistic or cocky in that sense, but like kind of separating through video content is like a different style in our industry. And even like merch is not a huge piece of our, monetization style. So it's very difficult to monetize. Long-winded way of saying it's very difficult to monetize in the fantasy industry because the value prop we give off is not to like support us through clothing and like our aesthetic style.
Oh, and that makes sense as well. Another thing I haven't had to deal with yet. So
yeah, it's fun to like start off with it, but it's one of those things where a lot of people get excited at the forefront. Then you actually get into like the logistics of it and physically selling merch and like, oh, do I buy all the t-shirts up front? Do I have to find a manufacturer? Do I have to use drop shippers? There's a lot of shit that goes on behind the scenes that once you get into it, you're like, it's usually not even fucking worth the hassle of actually selling them.
And I had heard you say something about, I don't know where I heard it. You could probably refresh my memory, but you were talking about how when people say, yeah, I'm going to buy one of your shirts, or yeah, I will buy, that's cool. I'm going to get one of those totally. Like, how do you feel about that kind of stuff?
Always bullshit. Always bullshit. Always bullshit. Nah, I mean, that's just like life in general.
Yeah.
I hold no like ill will towards people who do that shit. It's their money. It's their time. Like, you don't have to do anything if you don't want to. That's just like my practical business mind at this point. Like I've been selling merch for probably like 5 years, and people are like, oh, I can't wait to buy that shirt. And like 99% of the time, it just doesn't happen. And it's like, I'm not going to waste my like energy or emotion on whether or not this one person buys a shirt. So it's another one of those things, like when you start a new venture and like you're doing the podcast right now, like including merch within your content or your brand is like a new venture in itself. You start to get excited about it really quickly. And then the practical side of shit comes in. The realism comes in that every podcast is not going to get 100,000 downloads. Every t-shirt you put out is not going to make 1,000 sales. Things start getting real, and your brain starts to like adapt to that. And you start to say, okay, I'm going to start this new venture. It's going to be really exciting at first. And then the work comes in that I have to do steadily for like the next 2 to 3 years to make sure that realism of the sales matches like my excitement from the beginning of the venture. You know what I mean? Like there's a connection there.
No, I totally get it.
Yeah. Some people just, I don't think have kind of had the experience of like connecting the practicality of the situation.
No, that's for sure. And I think that a lot of people, I know that I've said that before just because I'm trying to be nice, I'm trying to support my friends, and then I forget, or I'm just like, shit, I don't have money right now. $600 isn't going to.
And like that's real as shit. Like people forget. I do that. It's not like I don't want to buy the person's shirt. Like I forget, and then before I know it, it's like I don't know if I like the shirt that much. Yeah.
I got fat now, so I can't fit in it. Not you, because you work out. But
I mean, like, listen, like real life happens. I'm not going to be mad at people because I do the same shit. So look in the mirror. That's really what I would think to that.
But it is good advice for people who are selling the merch to at least realize that people tell you, "Hey, I'm going to get one." They're more than likely not going to get one. So just kind of account for that. So we were talking earlier about the thumbnails that you have for YouTube and how that can attract people to come in and actually watch your content and everything. And it kind of reminds me of like a wine bottle. When you see a wine bottle with a really cool label, you're more drawn to buy that bottle of wine just because, oh, that's a cool gift to give somebody, or like, oh, that's got to be good because it looks cool, quote unquote. So with thumbnails, because a lot of YouTube sites just don't have them, or they have really bad ones, what do you think is the reason why they should focus on having at least decent thumbnails to get people to come watch?
Yeah, I mean, you put it really well there. Like when you're in an area that you don't know things well, like your first instinct is to reach out for the thing that is attractive to your eye right away. And that's going to be the thumbnail. That is a huge mistake from new brands or companies or whatever putting out content on YouTube, is not actually focusing on the thumbnail. And it's not even like it needs to be a masterpiece, right? But like you see a lot of terrible thumbnails in the fantasy space. And I'm like, that's, common denominator between any like successful piece of content needs to be like probably like a 6 out of 10 minimum, right? You need to like focus on that shit. And I don't really know like the formula to what makes a good thumbnail, but what I personally do, again, going back to looking at other channels, like I'll just browse YouTube. It doesn't even need to be fantasy football. It could be any channel, any content creator that I admire. And I'll look at thumbnails and I'll be like, that one attracts me. And I will like sit there and reverse engineer it and be like, what is it about that thumbnail that attracts me? Is it like the background color? I'll go like real niche. I'll be like, is it the outline of the person in the thumbnail? Is it the shadow? One. Yeah. Is it like the shadow behind the outline of the person? Like those are the ways you need to be thinking. And then once you figure out, like, learn how to do it. It ain't that fucking hard. Like, go on Google, be like, how do I put a shadow behind a person? You know what I mean? Like, those are the things that I think about. And those are the things that I do practically, right? In like real life situations that I think would help a lot of people. Yeah, the thumbnails are not something that like we do perfectly, but I think at a bare minimum, you need to make sure that they're like decent.
I agree. And there's a guy whose video channel I watch, but also listen to his podcast, Finn McKenty. He's with the Punk Rock MBA, and he does a music channel. And he did a whole thing on his business channel about thumbnails and everything. He said he changed a thumbnail and he got so many more people watching the actual video because of some little change he made, like even in the wording of what the title said and stuff. So
Yeah,
that is
it's a shame. Yeah, it's a shame because like some of these people, you know, you click because of the thumbnail, but you stay because of the content. A lot of the people won't even get to that part. There's so many people that probably put out fantastic content on YouTube in the fantasy space, really good information, you know, engaging, like fun stuff. But if you're not putting out good thumbnails, they're never even going to get to that point. So yeah, I mean, it needs to be a major focus.
And it is crazy to think that's something that we focus on in 2020, in 2021. But I mean, visual is the first thing you see. It's the first thing that gets you to be like, I want to, if I don't like the way it looks, I'm going to think that the quality isn't going to be that great. So yeah, putting out stuff like that is super dope. What do you think are some things that some YouTube channels just don't do correctly besides the thumbnail thing that they should probably be working on to get more viewers, more followers, more people that are actually subscribing to their content?
Yeah, I think aside from the thumbnail, obviously the title needs to be good. I think going back to other fantasy channels and seeing what works well for them and seeing how you could put your twist on it. I think so many people in fantasy football are so used to their way of putting out content that they don't realize that every platform is like wildly different from the one that they're coming from. So you see a lot of people coming from the podcasting world putting podcasts on their YouTube channel, and they're like putting pictures over it, and they're putting these things that like don't make sense on YouTube. Like if you watch it in another YouTube video, you'd be like, this is weird. But we come from a fantasy space where like we see pictures, or we're listening to podcasts all day that we're like, oh, this is not that weird, this is normal. But you have to understand that the YouTube audience is different than the Twitter audience, and is different than the podcast audience, and is different from XYZ audience, right? They're here to watch videos. Like YouTube is a video platform, so you have to make videos. Like what we do content-wise, like we try to put all our content on all the social media platforms, but our key pillar of content is always a long-form YouTube video. Like we make content, we make videos, and then we'll strip the audio and put it up on a podcast. We don't make a podcast first, put a camera in the corner, and then upload that to YouTube. So I think like if you're going to be making videos for YouTube, make videos. You know what I mean? Like this is a video platform. And I think a lot of people kind of take that for granted and assume that they grew on Twitter, grew on podcasting or whatever. And like, that's just going to be the same, but it's a different audience and a different platform. And you really have to think of it from outside of the fantasy space.
And do you think that YouTube, where you're able to actually like see the person who's talking and giving you the advice and all that jazz, do you think that aspect of it is really appealing to like just a common fantasy football player because they're seeing you as a human and not just somebody behind a keyboard typing something up or saying something to a microphone?
Yeah, I think it's so important. I think that like, I think that's another reason why I love YouTube, because I think video is so powerful. I think you get a better feel for a person. I think like, I don't know, I'm weird in this way, but I think one of the most like underrated things in the world are like micro expressions, like the expressions that people use on their face and just their hand gestures and shit like that. I think it makes you way more comfortable with people, and it makes you relate to them and maybe like in a subconscious way. And I think video is so powerful in that you could actually feel like you get to know somebody from watching them in a 5 or 10 minute video. I think podcasting does have a very endearing aspect to it where you can really like fall in love with someone through podcasting as well. But I think there's no replacement to video. And that's why I think like YouTube has such a good stronghold on it, because people are like falling in love with YouTube, but also like the content creators that are on YouTube. So it's like kind of like a two-pronged approach to it. I think video is just so exponentially more powerful than other forms of content creation.
I agree. I love the whole YouTube comeuppance right now because I'm like, holy crap, I didn't know that person was like, you look cool. Like, what kind of bands do you like to listen to? Or, all that stuff. Like, if I saw you, like, I know who you are. But if I was seeing you for the first time, I'd be like, okay, he's wearing a Bleachers shirt. I'm pretty sure that's a Bleachers shirt. Yes.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
And he's got tattoos and he's got cool glasses and he's got a nice haircut and all that stuff, like kind of like part of your brand.
I cut my own hair. Let's
Yeah,
go.
so that's
Yeah.
another thing. So speaking of cutting your own hair, you put out an article that was really, really like a handbook for people who want to get involved with the industry or just want to have a business mindset in general. So what was your thought process about putting that out? What's it called? Where can people find it? I know that it's pinned to the top of your Twitter profile, but or
Yeah.
your Twitter page. But yeah, I mean, what was that all about and why did you do it?
Dude, I don't know why. I don't really know why I did it. I just kind of like, I don't want to say blacked out, not in like a drunkard, like drug habity kind of way, but I just sat down and I was like, I don't know. I feel like I need to write this because I feel like I've learned a lot over the last X number of years. And again, like that is the type of content that I like to put out when I feel like doing that shit. So I just sat down and I was like, I just want to get it all off my chest. And sometimes I do that in my vlogs. Like a lot of my vlogs are just, they'll have like a 30-minute snippet of me talking to people as if it was a fantasy video, but it'll be about some random thing that happened in my life and like how I feel about it. But that article, in a sense, I really sat down like and just wrote the entire thing in one sitting. And it was like a long ass time. And at the end, I was like, holy shit. Like I just wrote basically my entire last 10 years of my life in that article. And it happened to be like right before New Year's and the new decade was coming. So I was like, oh, this is kind of like one of those corny ass, like, oh, things I wish I knew like 10 years ago before the new decade started. But yeah, I mean, it was just a combination of things that I guess I've experienced in my personal life, my personal relationships, business wise. And I just felt like it could probably help the younger generation that I feel like a lot of my demographic is at this point.
And the content that you have in there is evergreen, which is, I know that's a word a lot of people throw around, but like for real, it's going to apply to you no matter what. If it's now or, 3 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever, that everything you wrote there, it's going to hold up to the test of time. So when you write something like that and you're trying to guide people and help them out, do you feel like fantasy football is getting competitive, or do you feel like people are still friendly, helping each other, trying to bring each other up instead of like you and I are, versus each other, if you will?
Yeah. Like to be completely like frank, like I don't really look at myself as like, I know I'm in the, the fantasy football space.
Yeah.
I don't really consider myself like a fantasy football creator. I just like am the creator of whatever the fuck I want to put out. A lot of it just happens to be fantasy football right now. So I don't like look at anyone in the space as competition because I don't think anyone's like doing what I'm doing, and not in like a I'm better than them sense. It's just like I'm just doing me, and no one else can do me. So it's just like I'm not competing against anybody. Where it becomes a competition is kind of in like the numbers sense. If you're looking at it from like a subscriber, a follower, a monetization thing, then I have to ask myself, am I doing things that are too similar to people also in the industry? Then it can become a competitive thing. And for me, fuck yeah, like I'm running a business here, and like that's the way I look at it. I'm not competing against like the fantasy football industry, but if you're selling like a product that's like mine, like, yeah, we are competitors. And there are people like the footballers sell a draft kit. I sell a draft kit. Like, I fucking love those dudes. They're really good dudes. I think I respect the shit out of them. I respect the shit out of their work ethic and the way they've built their brand and everything. But like at the end of the day, I'm doing what I'm doing. And like, I want to make sure that I'm successful at what I'm doing. So it can be competitive, but like, I don't really align with most of the people in the space,
Right. And I that's why I think what you do is so refreshing, because you don't touch on one in particular thing. You have a bunch of different branches, like you were talking about, the different fellows that are underneath your branch and everything, or underneath your umbrella and all that stuff. And that's super dope, because it does get kind of old sometimes with people when they put out the content that's just kind of recycling the same content over and over. So you guys are like a refreshing fresh, yes, a refreshing.
Very, very refreshing. That sounded
I
like
have not been drinking margaritas. I've been drinking cider. We'll get to margaritas later, but but so that kind of stuff, and the whole entire the group of fantasy football people on Twitter, for instance, because I'm from the Twitter generation. I not grew up because I'm 37, but I've been on Twitter for a while, and I've seen the comeuppance of a lot of people because of Twitter. Do you think that Twitter has played a really crucial role in just where fantasy football is as an industry, and not just an industry, but also as, this global phenomenon, basically?
Yeah, I think I think Twitter's been like almost everything for the fantasy industry
Yeah.
up to this point. I think like and sometimes I actually don't know, like, because we're so ingrained in it. If you're inside fantasy Twitter, you have such a like a strong grasp on what's going on
Yeah.
that you like don't realize that some people don't know what's going on, you know? So you think
Yep.
about it and you're like, but when you're watching all these, we're in a cool industry where it's like the creators are the one that are actually like paving the way of the industry. It's not like we don't have these companies with like executives that are like, we're putting out this product and this is our global marketing plan or whatever. It's just like we put out whatever content we want and we're going to be the way we're going to be the ones that pave the way for the industry for the next 10 years. And I also think about that. Like, I'm just like, this is cool because I can inspire a bunch of creators within the fantasy space over the next 10 years to not only want to do fantasy. Like, you could also be like a pillar of the fantasy industry, but not have to be someone who only does fantasy stuff. So Twitter has definitely been instrumental, if not like the biggest part of the industry, in my opinion. But I also think it will be the downfall of a lot of people over the next 5 years because they've gotten so accustomed to that being the place that they grew on that they'll be. And we're seeing it now. We're seeing it with YouTube. We're seeing it with TikTok. We're seeing it with all the platforms, Instagram. All the dudes who got big on Twitter don't want to pivot. And they're going to realize really quickly that that's a huge mistake.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. I mean, there wasn't such a thing as MySpace, fantasy football MySpace. But if there was, I mean, hopefully those guys wouldn't still be over there trying to.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it was. If there was, like, the people would still be on it, and like that would have been their claim to fame.
And you were talking about Instagram too, and I know that you did your own little. I guess you had a series, right? Because I watched a couple episodes to learn how to talk to people, And you had a series where you were talking to people in the fantasy football industry, and it was not a little thing. It was huge because you had some of the biggest, baddest names, out there on your podcast talking business, which is something you don't usually hear those people talking about. And you had the fantasy football counselor on, and I know that he rubs some people the wrong way, but what is the importance of having people talk to you and getting a different side of people? One guy thinks one thing, another guy has a completely different business plan, but it's working for person A and person B. What's the importance of showing there's different routes to go?
Yeah, I mean, that was really the reason I started it, was to show these younger people that like you don't need to do what I'm doing to get where I'm at. Like, you don't need to do what this blogger did to get where he's at, right? It was just trying to, when I first started, I was like, I'm going to just get the most diverse group of people. Like, the first season I did it, it was, Andy Holloway was the first one I got on, obviously big time company guy, like created this big ass brand. And then I brought on a guy who was, the counselor, huge on Instagram. And then I brought on a woman, Paige, and I brought on Brad, who was big on Yahoo. And I'm like, I want all different points of view, so that when you look at like who you are as a person, you can't be like, nah, like I can't make it, because all these people have wildly different backgrounds. And it's like, of course you can make it. You just have to do what's like natural to you. So when I started, that was it. But I do that every off season. So like when I'm not doing in-season content, I start this up probably like January, February through NFL draft time. And that's like an outlet for me, because as you can see, like I'm super passionate about the business side of things. So like this is a way for me to talk to people that I think are innovating within the space. And over like the 3-year time span that I've been doing it, I've obviously grown as a person and gotten more experience on the business side of things. So like my viewpoint on the series itself has kind of taken a pivot towards like what I'm trying to get out of it. And I've been talking to people that I think are a little bit more experienced in the sense, and maybe not talking to the beginner so much, which is maybe a bad pivot when it comes to like thinking about my audience, but maybe it's a little bit of a selfish interview series at this point. And to be completely frank with you, like I'm at the point where I've interviewed a lot of the people. There's not many like businesses and brands within fantasy, right? Like you have a lot of people kind of doing the same thing, like kind of doing podcasting or blogging or whatever. But I don't see like a ton of innovation from a business standpoint, like a monetization kind of standpoint. So I'm kind of like trying to figure out like who I want to bring on for the next season. And that's kind of been a little bit of a struggle for me. And I'm thinking like from a personal standpoint, like maybe I just start to interview other creators outside of the space that like kind of have inspired me, whether they're in fantasy sports or whether they're fucking, I don't know, making camera parts or creating clocks or whatever. I don't know, whatever the case may be. I don't know. The series has kind of just been an ongoing twist and branch of wherever my life has gone, in a sense.
Well, and I mean, like Dax Shepard, he has his podcast, and
dude, Jack Shepard's podcast. I tweeted. Sorry to cut you off. Like
No,
I've done
you're
it
totally
every
cool.
time.
I'm good with it.
So I tweeted out like last week or 2 weeks ago. I was like, does anyone have any podcast suggestions outside of like fantasy, outside of sports, outside of that kind of shit? And I got like
I remember
bunch of comments. Yeah, and JJ Zachariason commented the Dak Shepard podcast, and I've been listening to it like nonstop.
Yeah,
that dude is so fucking smart.
Oh my God, he is.
It's unbelievable. I had no idea like who he was, and he is
just so good at what he does too.
He's almost like a more intellectual version. It's like a more intellectual version of like the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah,
which is not a knock on Joe Rogan. He's wildly intellectual as well, but like he I don't know. They're kind of the same. They just interview like awesome people, but he has the amount of knowledge up in his brain is fucking mind blowing.
No, I love listening to his podcast. That's another one. Like when I decided I want to do an interview podcast, I was like, oh, but like I listened to Dax and I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm going to be able to talk to people because like he makes it sound so eloquent. See, I can't even talk. And I'm like, I'm just this person who's over here just trying to learn, another selfish kind of thing, but I'm trying to learn. So learning from you guys, when you talk to me, I know other people are learning too, but it really helps me out. But with Dax, like he brings in, people at the top of their field to come in and do, the experts on experts and stuff. So like, that's something I don't think people would shy away from on your channel. If you were to do something like that, I think that
like that's what I've thought about. Like long term, I was like, yo, it'd be so cool to start bringing on all these like top world class kind of people and shit. I know I'm like 10 years away from ever having those people on, but I wonder that too, if like I can even hold up that conversation, because I think dudes like Joe Rogan and Dak Shepard have gone through so much in their life. They're so experienced that like them being able to keep up that conversation comes from the fact that they've actually lived through some of the shit that they're talking about, like you can invite someone that you think is interesting on, but if you can't relate to them on a personal level, it does make the interview, kind of tough. So it's a combination of like these dudes, like Joe Rogan, people are like, oh, it's just like Joe Rogan kind of like sits there and like smokes weed and just talks to people. It's like, dude, you underestimate the amount of work he probably puts in and the amount of research that he does for each fucking person to come on and be able to relate to them on like every topic.
That's 100%. It's 100%. Going into it blindly and not knowing anything about the person that you're talking to is just
terrible idea. Did you go into any of your interviews on this series without like actually like doing any research? Just being like, oh, I'm so cool, I'll be able to do a conversation.
I'm gonna be honest because that's part of this podcast. Last night, I interviewed a guy that I know. He's an up and coming guy in the fantasy football industry, but he doesn't have a whole lot of background besides the last year or two. So it was harder to come up with things to ask him just because he didn't have, that background. So I found myself kind of stumbling over my questions more than I'd like, even though I had things written down. It just, I didn't feel like I was going to get a huge answer from it. So
yeah, it's important now. That's what I've realized too. Like when I first started, I was like, oh, who am I going to get on for the series? Now I'm like really selective. Like who am I going to get good shit out of? Who am I like passionate about listening to? Who do I want to actually learn from, And those will get it out because you're like asking genuine questions, not questions that you like feel like you need to ask,
For sure. Yeah, exactly. And you want to learn from the person that you're talking to. You want to interview somebody that you find something about them is appealing. You want to find out why they've made it the way that they have. Like I've had Andy Barron's on here. Like I said, I listed off the guys that like, I was like, whoa, at first, really nervous. Even with you today, I was like, oh my God, because your business mind is just so freaking out there that I can't even like hold a candle to that. And so, but then when I start talking, it's like, wow, this comes out a lot easier than it does with somebody that I like actually know,
Yeah. I think like when I talk about this stuff, maybe it's a little far fetched, but I try to like, I guess, relate it to like everyday normal life. Like I'm not like I'm not like better than anybody. I'm not smarter than anybody. I just like I've experienced, if you've never sold merch, like you wouldn't understand what I was saying before that. But if I'm like, yo, listen, it's really not that easy. It's really not that profitable. It's like everybody can relate to that. Like, oh, it's actually not that glamorous. When people post their new t-shirts on Twitter, it's like, okay, like you're going to sell 4 of them and then not really give a shit about them anymore. It's just, I don't know. I guess it's just the fact that I've been doing it. I'm really passionate about it. I've been doing it for 5 to 7 years. So of course I have a little bit more experience, but it's not, it's not on a level that we can't relate to as a human.
Exactly. And a lot of people that have come on here have talked about imposter syndrome and feeling like, they shouldn't be where they are and all this stuff. And it's like, you really need to take a look in the mirror. Did you ever have an experience like that where you felt like you shouldn't be where you are and that there's people out there that like you can't even like, I know that you're a big Brad Evans fan. Like, were you ever like, I just shouldn't be like brought up in the same sentence as Brad Evans?
Yeah, like I think about that all the time. I think I think about like imposter syndrome, um, probably daily, maybe
Yeah.
weekly. I don't know. It's like as you progress as a person, as you set new goals for yourself, like you want more. Like you're going to go
Right.
after something more ambitious, and every time you're going after something that's you've never done before, you're going to be like, I can't do this. Like that's not me, you know. So you interview person X, and you were really nervous about it. You're like, I'm an imposter. Then you do it, and then you get to the next person that's maybe a little bit higher than them, and you're like, I shouldn't be here. And before you know it, you look back and you're like, I'm also the person that just did that. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's no, there's not like a special click inside of you or switch inside of you that like you're better than another person. It's just like the people who do things did them and the people who haven't like haven't. So yeah, I feel it all the time, but I just try to tell myself that like there's nobody that's, I mean, of course there are very, very special people like on the planet, but 99.9% of the shit that's gotten done on earth is just people working hard and just people maybe right place, right time, people that are willing to put themselves out there. So yeah, I mean, I feel imposter syndrome all the time, but like, I think it's important that people know that that's normal for everybody.
Right. It's normal for everybody. I know going into it when I first started, and I'm not anything now. I mean, I'm a lot bigger than I was when I first started out, but it's like, why do people want to listen to me? Why do people want to see what I'm doing? So how important do you think practicing like talking to people, practicing having, conversations, even if you're doing a podcast, maybe the first couple of episodes aren't going to be that great because you're just learning. How important is getting those reps in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like a subjective thing.
Mhm.
I guess I was lucky in a sense that I was always like really comfortable on camera, so it didn't take me a lot of reps to like get comfortable. But anytime I've done shows with new people, and I know that they're like not comfortable, it definitely takes some time to ease into that. And I think that's like it's kind of your job as I guess from my point of view, like I kind of have to be a leader for the people that I take on to do content with me, right? If they're going to be like on my team in a sense, I have to like understand that from like a personality standpoint and like what makes you comfortable, what makes you not comfortable, and kind of segue that way. So it's like, yeah, reps absolutely matter. I mean, for most things, if I think showing up unprepared is like is the single most important thing that you should not do. Like being unprepared for things, you could tell in a second. So I think like having reps is important, but I also like you're gonna fuck up in the beginning. Like that's completely normal. I think a lot of it just goes back to like knowing imposter syndrome, fucking up. All these things are normal. All these things are okay. Like it's gonna happen. You have no chance of fading those things.
For sure. And with when it comes to like being comfortable in front of the camera and everything, I can firsthand say like this scared the fuck out of me before I actually started doing it. Like before I even guess it on a podcast, I was like, what do I need? What kind of equipment do I need? Do I need to have this? Do I need to have that? Where do I need to be to do it? And really at the end of the day, yeah, I've improved some of the stuff that I have, but at the end of the day, you want to put out content, people want you on their show, then jump on and kind of just learn,
It's the only way. Yeah, it's the only way you're gonna learn is by doing shit. And once you screw something up, your body and your mind pays extra special attention to it. When you get into like a rhythm of doing things that are comfortable, you don't really grow from that. You need to do things that like really, not to be cliche, but like once you're out of your comfort zone, that's when your body like really. There's an alert, there's a trigger that's like, fuck, like you need to figure out how to do this or you're gonna look like a fool. So that's when you change. Like you gotta fuck up in the beginning.
And I know that mental health is a big thing, and like being, having anxiety is a big thing. A lot of people struggle with that. I know I do, and I've been very candid about like I take meds for it and keeps me, at least like I don't feel too bad, like my heart's going to explode before I come on here, but you still get the anxiety. So people just need to realize that that's part of it. But if you're not, like you said, I really like the quote that you were talking about, like you're going to grow, but you have to do things that cause you to have anxiety in order to do it.
Yeah, like your brain's not going to recognize it. Your brain's not going to be like, we need to figure this problem, how to solve this problem out, because it's such an uncomfortable position for most people.
And when I was talking to TJ Hernandez, he said, well, on his show, when he was interviewing people, the first time he had people on were people that he knew. So he had at least had conversations with them and stuff before. And I'm kind of like all over the place. Like I've never talked to you before. And I've like swung for the fences and have like slid into people's DMs like a crazy person, like, please come on my show. So, you know, big name guys. Like,
oh, dude, I've been left on red on that business series. Like there are probably a dozen people I can think of off the top of my head that just never answered my Twitter DM. And I'm just like, I do take it personally. You know, I'm just like, you motherfucker, like, why don't you want to come on? But like, again, it goes back to like the selling of clothing or whatever. It's like their time, their energy. It's like, it might have just been wrong place, wrong time that they saw that. It is what it is. You know, I like, you can't really take that shit to heart. It's you gotta have thick skin.
No, you can't. And just like the selling with clothing of when people say, oh yeah, I'll buy a shirt, just the same. I feel with people that are like, yeah, I'll come on your show sometime. And then they just leave it at that. Or like, I'm really busy right now, but sometime I'll come on. And then you like, when? And then they don't say anything. It's the same thing, you know? So
I mean,
busy, you know, so people are busy, people have time, and they want to spend their time doing the thing that's going to be the most productive for them. So it happens. Come on a little podcast like mine. But then there's cool people like you who are like, yeah, sure, you know, because
dude, I love these fucking conversations. Like you so much.
Dude, so I've already said it. I'm not an interviewer. That's not what I want to do. What I want to do is just like make this a fucking like sit down. We're having a conversation with even like people from like the big name sites that are like ESPN, Yahoo, and everything else. And they come on and they're like a totally different person than they are when they're on TV. Because like you were saying earlier, some people have to like, you know, you have to watch what you say when you work for certain sites, and you can do what you want because you're your boss, you know? So how important do you think it is to like, if you aren't in one of those big sites, how important do you think it is to just, I know we've touched on it a lot, but just to put yourself out there like that and, you know, curse if you want to curse and wear what you want to wear and do what you want to do.
Dude, I think over the next, whatever, like 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
If you are not your 100% complete self on these platforms, that's the common denominator right now. Like if you're not doing that as the minimum, I know there's so many people that, and I hate like using the word authenticity now because it's like, it's become like a buzzword and it's kind of like cringy in a sense. But if you're really not 100% yourself on these videos, like you'll talk to me now and then you can go watch a video of me on my channel. You're going to get the same person. You walk into my fucking apartment right now, have a conversation with me. Like you won't get any different emotions, any different reactions out of me than exactly how I am now. And I think that is so like attractive and refreshing to people that subscribe to your channel for fantasy football or for whatever the fuck you're talking about. I think over the next 3 to 5 years, like if you're not doing that at the bare minimum, there's no fucking way you're going to succeed. You know, like whatever you're doing, I think authenticity and like being really, really you and being able to be vulnerable and open about like who you are as a person is like one of the only things that's going to keep your audience growing and them being loyal to you.
For sure. Because they feel like they're your friends. They feel like they are, you know, very close to you, even though you guys may have never met or only had a passing conversation. Like being able to see people like you, the footballers, you know, the people that interact on a daily basis, all these new podcasts that are coming up with all these co-hosts that like feed off of each other so well. It's just great to see. And I know that some of the guys that are in a part of your team were guys that you have known forever growing up with these guys and things like that. How important do you think that kind of chemistry is to building a brand and not having like everything just kind of fail?
Interesting question. Cause like so we have a few, I would say maybe we have like 6 to 8 people probably like on the team, I would say. Two of the people I do a show with that we do on this table right behind me, they come from the same town that I grew up in. So I've known them for a long time, but they were not like, one of them was a close friend of mine, but not like my best friend at any point. Another one I didn't really even know until we kind of started playing fantasy football and stuff together. So I think there's probably a fine line. I think like the better chemistry you have, like if I was doing content with like literally my best friends and stuff and they knew fantasy football, I think our content would be incredible, like through the fucking roof, like no stopping it. But I also think there's a fine line between people that maybe make you think differently too. Like I look at things with my best friend, like we're the same fucking person, you know, like I'm thinking something, he's thinking the same thing. And when someone else kind of comes into the game and you know them and the chemistry's good and I think like you need to be on like the same sense of humor level, right? Like that's what makes good chemistry there. But if they think differently than you, then it's going to make for good content as well. It's going to make for like argumentative pieces. It's going to make for like more growth and thought pieces like that. So I think there definitely needs to be chemistry, obviously. But like how that chemistry comes about, I think can probably come in a bunch of different ways. There's a lot of content out there that's made by two people that are so fucking different from each other that just works, you know?
For sure. I also agree with that. Like I watch these shows and I listen to these shows and stuff, and you can tell who has it, who would be better off probably being a solo podcast versus being with a co-host and stuff. What do you think that the biggest difference between having a co-host and doing it on your own is?
I think that's kind of a subjective thing again too. I don't think a lot of people like to do solo shows, but for me, I've always kind of been like an independent person. Um I think I work better by myself. I think I'm more clear when I'm by myself because I don't have like interruptions. But when I'm doing stuff with my friends, when it's not so like information based and we're just kind of like shooting the shit, I think it can be funny that way. So I think it kind of talks to your personality. However, you kind of give off your value prop, the best probably works for you. But I've gotten comfortable to where I think I'm versatile enough that I could do it with myself. I could do it with two people or three people or whatever it is. But that is something that takes practice. Like I was doing interviews, like when I did it on my channel, was something that I still need to get better at it. Like even talking with you, like I'll cut you off sometimes. And I know you're like, oh, don't worry about it, it's fine. But I'm like, fuck. Yeah, I'm like, fuck. Like I keep doing it over and over. And like sometimes I'll do that with people that I bring on my channel, and like they're not done talking, and I'm like gonna jump in because I was like, oh, I have a point. And like and like some people are cool with it. Some people are like, oh no, it makes the conversation like beautiful and natural. Yeah, like and I like having conversations with people like that. But some people, like, you kind of take their mojo and then they lose their train of thought, and it comes back to like, you have to figure out what kind of person they are. Like, can you do that all the time? Or like, I think there's like a lot of nuance to this shit.
I have to like write words down, like keywords down on a notebook, just so I can remember to go back to it. And I still forget it half the time.
I do that shit in the interview too all the time. I give them usually like I'll send them over a show sheet of probably like six key points I want to touch on, and then throughout it I'll have a notepad and I'll just be like writing down like I don't know the word. It would be like wall, whatever they said. It would be something stupid, and I'll be like, make sure I get back to that, and then half the time I forget to bring it up again.
The exact same way, and I haven't been doing this long, but that's how it's been going for me. I have a list, and today I was like, okay, I'm going to put it in order of the way that I want to ask, hit on things. But I'm still, you guys start talking and you get to the questions that I already have that I want to touch on, so it's dope. And I don't send a show sheet out just because, like, I feel like you should already freaking know what, ask. It's a business, shit. If it was like a fantasy football related podcast or whatever, and that's another thing when it comes to podcasting and stuff, is like, you don't know that there's the work that you have to put into like coming up with the show and putting, this, that, and the other, and getting all the stats, because you don't want to talk all stats. You want to be able to appeal to the normal fantasy football player and the degenerate that's like in 20 leagues or whatever. So how do you figure out or find a way to balance that out where you don't come off as a complete stat nerd, but at the same time, you are giving the important information, the main course, to people?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I really have a strategy for it per se. I kind of just do whatever's comfortable for me. And I've like I guess I'm fortunately like good at communicating to the people in my demographic. Like I think it goes back to like the personality again. Like if you're okay showing your personality and like talking how you would talk to your best friend or your mom or whoever it is, and you talk to your audience that way, they can understand you on like an emotional level. And I think when you do that, like you come across with the numbers and stats a lot more clearly to them, because they're not like worrying about like, oh, like what is this guy saying? What is he doing? Is he telling me the fucking truth? Is he telling me important things? Once you kind of have that loyalty behind it, you stop worrying about all like the outside nonsense, and you can kind of listen to them speaking about what they're speaking about. So like I like to go really fucking in depth with my stats, but like I also drop F-bombs all the time in my videos. I'll also like stop mid video and start talking about like a fucking date I went on this weekend or something. You know what I mean? Like there's no direction that I have notes and stuff that I want to go down, but like I would never stop myself and be like, I can't do that because I need to get to like this fucking separation stat or yards per carry stat or whatever. So I think it goes back to like really being natural to who you are.
Yes. I mean, I can't agree with that even anymore, because you hit it right on the head. What's just harder, do you think, to give out? Do you think fantasy football advice is harder to give out, or business advice is harder to give out?
Harder in the sense that I would say fantasy football advice is easy to give out, I would say. There's an abundance of it in the industry. There's people that do it way better than me and you, and there are people that do it better than those people that do it better than us. You can find fantasy information anywhere. It's tough to give it out because so many people are relying on you when you do give it out. If you're like, yo, I love this dude, make sure you draft him in the first round. Half of your audience is going to own, like, I loved fucking Miles Sanders this year. And now I know I'm never going to hear the end of it throughout the next summer. Like, dude, you told us all to draft Miles Sanders, whatever, first round, second round. So it's like, it's not difficult to come up with like information to give out for fantasy football podcasts. It's fucking everywhere and people regurgitate the same stats. Business wise, like, I don't give out business advice. I just like tell you what's happened to me.
Right.
Like I'm just like, this happened to my business. Here's what I would have done differently. And here's like X, Y, Z, Y. So it's not like a right or wrong. It's just like, this is what happened to me, and you could kind of take it however you want. So I try to be as transparent with that shit as possible. So it's kind of like fantasy football is more like black and white, where like people will get mad at you based on what you say. The business and personal shit is just like, you can't be mad at me for like for telling you what happened in my life. Like that's not, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just telling you my experience.
And just like we were talking about, everybody that's come up in the fantasy football industry has different life experiences. And so, yeah, I mean, you could look at 12 different people's rankings. You can look at 12 people's different, life stories, and the rankings are going to be closer than the life stories. So yeah, for sure. How important do you think it is to interact with people that interact with you, your fans, your group or whatever? How important is it to talk to them and give them, what they want to hear?
Dude, like everything. I think like another huge mistake I think people make in fantasy because they're on Twitter is that they care more about like the fantasy football community than their own community.
Yes.
And I'm like,
oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that until now. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. Like when I thought of that too, I was like, yo, this is like, it's so backwards. Yeah. People that are trying to come up in the industry through the industry are doing it wrong. Like you have to create your own thing, your own space, your own community, and that will force other people to recognize you. Like, again, I don't look at myself as like a fantasy creator. You will very, very rarely, if ever, find me on Twitter interacting with people in the industry about fantasy football conversations. I talk to people that like reply to my tweets on a personal level. I'll talk to my people like on YouTube comments. We're on Discord. We have like a text platform. Like I talk to my people because those are the people that I attract and those are the people that I like get along with in life. And again, nothing against the people in the fantasy industry.
Right.
I don't really relate to them on a personal level. They're all like really good dudes and very hardworking.
Yeah, for sure.
We're just like different. And I don't know. That's just not really my thing. And I think like people trying to force themselves into that are looking at things very backwards.
I get that. I feel like when I'm on Twitter and I'm talking to people, I feel like I start following more people who are like, hey, what kind of band do you like? And we start talking about music, not talking about fantasy football, but talking about that or some television show that I liked or a movie or something, something that appeals to me that's not fantasy football related. I think that having that
shit feels good, right? Like that shit feels, those are fun conversations to have.
It's nice for somebody to say, I heard you on this podcast say, or I read that you wrote this, but it's also cool to say, hey, I saw you in a Rancid shirt and I really like Rancid. Like, what's your favorite song? This kind of stuff. Like, then you're like, hey, you know me as a person.
Yeah. It's probably a combination. Like I'm kind of like, I guess a little bit more cynical about like fantasy football and the industry itself than the normal person doing it. Because when I started this whole shit, like I was very passionate about fantasy and not that I don't like it anymore. Like I will always play fantasy and I'll have fun doing it.
Yeah,
but like I've definitely lost a little bit of steam with how passionate I am about it, but it's not from like a dull standpoint. It's because I've picked up passion in other parts of it, mainly conversations like these, like marketing and figuring out how to scale what we're doing here with other people being a little bit more passionate about fantasy football. So it's probably on a personal level that I less enjoy talking about that kind of stuff within my community and within the community itself. So it's not like right or wrong. I don't want to like come out off here like super pretentious and being like, you shouldn't be doing this shit. But like on a personal level, it's just about knowing who you are. You know what I mean? Like there's no right or wrong. There's just you're right. And everything else that's not you is wrong.
Some people, their life is stats and that's why they got into it, or their life is watching film, or their life is this, or their life is that. And that's the hobbies they like to do. And that's what they like to talk about. And I don't want to talk about fantasy all the time. How do you feel about the people that are like, stick to football,
Oh, like those people, I low-key love those kind of comments because I get to like fucking fire back at them. I love I love fighting with people on Twitter, like about random shit for
Me
no.
too.
And yeah, just like I like using my energy on that shit just for no fucking reason. Those people are just like, I don't know. I mean, at this point in my life, I'm like very comfortable with where I'm at and like who I am in my own skin and shit. So people that are cynical like that, or people have such narrow viewpoints on life, I'm like, dude, I feel really bad for you that you don't get to enjoy like normal life. It's not like a me versus you thing. It's like dude, that sucks that you don't get to like have viewpoints on life in a positive or an opening way. Like you'll never change your viewpoint. Like what you just respond. How can you read what I just said? Like I always know if my intention's good, I don't worry about the things I say. That's really what it comes down to. And if you can't understand that like my intention was coming from like a good place or at least like a funny place or whatever the fuck it may be, then that's not on me. That's not on me to control. Like I can't control how you react to what I say.
And some people just take things to heart and they don't realize that there are people out there that are just dicks. Like, you know, plain and simple, they're dicks. So what kind of advice do you have for people who, you know, want to get involved in the fantasy football industry, want to do that kind of stuff, but they don't have thick enough skin to like handle having criticism? You know, is that something that they might not be able to get over, or do you think that there's a way to overcome that?
I mean, yeah, like I don't know if there's a way to like overcome that. I think you kind of have to change your mindset again. Like going back to the people who leave comments on my YouTube videos about something, like almost 99.9% of the time it's just a reflection of their own insecurity. Like if they're making fun of you for like a physical appearance thing, or if they're making fun of you for like XYZ, it's because they have insecurities about themselves and they want to shift the attention to you rather than it's always like a subconscious thing from them. I'm just like, dude, like I feel you have to feel bad for those people because you know they're in like a really bad. For you to go onto a YouTube video, like watch it, like when I post this, I'll probably get negative comments. I'll be like, dude, how are you gonna watch this conversation? Like understand that we're just like having fun and like the intent here is good, and then being like, blah, 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 like fuck you. I'm like, dude, you know, like I don't know. I don't know if it's about developing thick skin as it is developing maybe a thicker mind. You know,
Hey,
different mindset.
Hey, that's a t-shirt slogan.
Put that on it. Yeah, put that on a fucking t-shirt.
So you're like super motivational, even if you don't mean to come off that way. The things that you say and the way that you express them come off like, oh my gosh, I look up to this dude, what he's doing, especially since you have so many younger followers. It's pretty cool to have them look up to you and stuff. Have you ever thought about doing something like having some sort of either, you know, motivational kind of thing, or like a YouTube series or anything like that, where you like have people come in and or whatever? I don't know, because I'm not cool like that. I can come up with cool ideas, but you know what I mean.
It's kind of funny. Thank you. That is like an actual compliment. And I kind of take it like oddly in a sense. As you could tell, I'm kind of like stumbling over my words. I don't really know how to fucking take it. I don't try to like, again, I don't really try to be motivational, but I think in today's world, like being transparent is motivation, you know, like that in a sense is. So I don't like, I don't want to like try to preach about shit, but like I've been through some shit that I think would help people out. But I don't think I ever approach things from a motivational standpoint, like ever. Going back to like the business conversation thing, it's just like, I'm just telling you what I've been through and like what I hope you can learn from it. So the intent is not really to be like motivational, because I think most people have this idea of what motivation is. It's like, oh, some like rah-rah shit, like get excited. And I'm like, that's not what I think motivates most people. I think what motivates most people is actually seeing real shit done. I think that's why I like documented from the age where I was like 22 or 23, because that's real motivation. Like that shit, when you're a 22-year-old kid and you see a 22-year-old guy who has eventually become successful 8 years down the line, you're like, ah, shit, like that's actually motivational to me, because it means that I can do that, right? It's like real, putting the real energy and the real practicality and like real lifing it, you know? So
For sure.
yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'd ever approach things from a motivational standpoint, but I'm glad that like people can take motivation from it.
For sure. Yeah. And who knows where you're going to be in 10 years? Maybe you will be. You know, we'll listen back.
Yeah. I also think, do you ever listen to like Gary Vee? You know what Gary Vee is?
I do know Gary Vee. I haven't, people have suggested him to me, and I've listened to a couple of podcasts, but I'm just like one of those people that listens to like one or two and then like jumps to another one. So I don't.
Yeah. I fucking love that dude. Like more than anyone I think on the planet. And that's not even hyperbole. Like that guy has changed my life and my mindset in ways that I can't even explain. Right. But I think a lot of the ideas that I have in my head kind of stem from a lot of the shit that he says. And I think about it, I'm like, oh shit, like that made so much sense. And then I start thinking about it and kind of like branch my ideas off of that. And he says that shit all the time too. He's just like, dude, I'm not a motivational speaker. You know, I'm just like telling you what's what. I'm telling you like what's actually happening and what I've been through and that kind of stuff. So I needed to shout out Gary Vee because I never come on one of these kind of podcasts and don't talk about him.
No, it's really awesome, and people can go and listen to that and see exactly what you're talking about. So it's really cool to find a new thing that really motivates you and gets you going. So it's good to have those people that you can listen to. Is there any other like podcasts that you listen to, maybe outside of the fantasy football realm, that you think do a really good job of putting out what you would put out if you were doing what they were doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I listen to a lot of podcasts. It's definitely my main form of consumption when it comes to content. I don't watch a lot of videos. Ironically, I almost never read blog posts. My podcast lineup is almost like 100% fantasy stuff and 50% fantasy stuff, 50% like marketing and business stuff. So I listen to a lot of niche podcasts that interview people who run businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm so weird. Like sometimes I'll like go downstairs and I'll sit on my couch and I'll sit in front of my TV, but I like won't turn my TV on. I'll turn my speaker on and I'll put like a podcast on like that. It's so like that's legitimately just what I enjoy doing. And I'm glad that like in today's world, that's a really good thing to be interested in because it could make you be super productive. So I could pull up my podcast right now and talk about some of the, or just like mention some of the better marketing podcasts that I listen to. Just give me
I'm
one
always
sec.
looking for new podcasts to listen to because I love hearing people interact with other people and just kind of get bouncing ideas off of each other. It's just podcasts.
Yeah. So there's one called Bulletproof Radio with Dave Asprey. So actually, I guess some of them are business, but some of them are like lifestyle focused and like nutrition, health, like fucking weird shit, like anti-aging kind of stuff. So Dave Asprey, Bulletproof Radio. We have just straight up social media marketing with Michael Stelzner. The Gary Vee audio experience, SPI with Pat Flynn. And then I am kind of obsessed with like some of Barstool's podcasts that are not like comedy focused, but the founder of it, Dave Portnoy, does a podcast about like the inner workings of Barstool. It's called the Dave Portnoy Show.
Yeah.
And I think he's like one of the most brilliant minded marketers in the world right now. So I kind of like consume anything he puts out that has any relevance to business. So almost all the content I consume is like for work. If it's not like giving me information that I could use to put out other content, then I probably don't. It's weird, but I don't listen to a lot of shit for like that most people would consider enjoyment. It's enjoyment to me, but like most people would be like, why the fuck are you listening to that? You know?
Well, talking about listening to podcasts and listening to things that are focused on work and things of that nature, are you one of those people that can't turn it off? Like even when you're out, you're still kind of thinking in the back of your mind, like, oh, tomorrow or whatever.
Like work?
Yeah, work.
Yeah. So like, yeah, always like my work is my life. It's my lifestyle at this. I think I would say, and that's in a very like fortunate tone. Like I've been able to kind of intertwine what I do for work with my life. Like I'll have a camera most places that I go, and I've tried to kind of make sure that like my friends are also now part of my content, so that it's never like work-life balance. It's almost just like everything I do is kind of work related, because even the stuff that I'm not filming or creating content off of like feeds the energy that I kind of need for my work in a sense. So my brain doesn't shut off when it comes to thinking about work stuff, but in a positive way.
Excellent. A lot of people talk about work and it's always in a negative way when you're out and stuff with your friends. You're like, just stop talking about it. So yeah.
Yeah, dude, like a lot of my friends, like especially people that I meet that are like new, I kind of like tell them what I do, and they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, like do you mind if I like ask you questions about it? Like I know like people hate talking about work, and I'm like, low key, I'm like super fucking happy to talk about any questions that you have,
And I love that, even though like I have a full-time job that's not this, obviously this is just me right now, just trying to like grind and have fun. But when people do find out that I like write for the fantasy footballers or whatever, they'll be like, oh man, that's so cool. Can I ask you, like, I even had a teacher, I used to work at a school, and a teacher that was like, hey, I want you to come in and like talk to my third graders about, writing for a fantasy football website. So like the stuff that can come out of it is so dope. So
yeah, dude, that's like that. It's, people put things on a pedestal, I feel like, and don't understand almost like the ramifications of what they're doing. Like you saying that and getting that opportunity because you did that is like, it's real life. It's super practical, and like this interview series
Yeah.
will put you on the map for things when they think about lifestyle things or business content. And a lot of the reason I do like the behind the business series is
Mhm.
because I'm passionate about this, and this like segues my content into a business realm. So like eventually when those videos or podcasts start doing bigger numbers, there will be people outside of the fantasy industry like taking notice and being like, oh, this kid understands marketing and branding and business, and we could work with him even though we have nothing to do with like sports. It's a matter of like the content that you put out into the world
Mhm.
is what the world is going to see you as. So when you're doing business kind of things, like you're going to be more known as a business person as well as fantasy stuff. So it's like it's very practical to do a lot of this stuff if you're passionate about it.
And you said kid just a minute ago. You are younger than a lot of people that are, out there putting a brand together, even with the fantasy football realm. Like most of those guys and gals have been around for a little bit longer than you have. How when you look at yourself and what you've been able to accomplish at the age that you are you ever do you ever think, wow, like people my age don't do this stuff? Or do you like are you like people my age should do this stuff? Why aren't they doing this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it. I guess like I've all of those thoughts, less the former of it. I do realize that like I've probably done a lot of things that like 28-year-olds don't do. I think when you're a little bit younger, you're kind of like, oh, you have all the time in the world. Like and also we live in a world where like you go on Instagram for 5 seconds and you see 10 people that are way younger than me, making way more money than me, with way more followers than me, that are way better. Like all of those fucking things kind of accumulate. And then before you know it, you're like, okay, I ain't shit again. You know what I mean? Like it just registers in your head like very quickly. I want more people to do this stuff. It's like wildly freeing. And it's really like, I think everybody should have some kind of creative outlet, right? Like whatever's kind of natural to you. It's like, it's another reason why I want to bring my friends into it. I try to like talk random people into like, I'm like, start a fucking podcast. You're like, oh, I want to be I had a friend who's like, I want to be I want to open my own practice in psychology or psychiatry or whatever. One day I want to have my own practice. I'm like, how do you think you're going to get eyeballs on you and you being smart and you knowing the field well in 10 years if you're not like providing this information with people? Like the world is going to change in 10 years. The people that are making the most money as like real estate agents right now, as like lawyers, you wouldn't think of it, but it's the people that are doing the same thing that we're doing in fantasy football, they're doing in their space. But people are so used to like what has been happening for the previous 10 years that going back to like the practicality of this shit it's just very, very real. So like, yes, I want people my age. I want people younger than me. I want people fucking older than me who are usually more apprehensive to do this stuff, to do it, because there's very real effects from it.
What do you have to say to the people that want to do it, but they're like, I'm not going to be any good. I'm not going to do, I have all these ideas in my head, but I just don't think that people are going to want to listen to what I have to say. Do you think that you gain a following, whether it's 5 or 500 or 5,000 or 5 million, and you should just try to appeal to your quote unquote fan base? Or do you think like, hey, maybe you're better suited, maybe writing, or maybe like, doing a different form of thing than being in front of a camera?
Yeah. I mean, like you got to understand what you're good at. Like, I don't think everybody should be on YouTube. I don't think everybody should be podcasting. I don't think everybody should be writing. Some people can do all three. Some people can't do, some people are good at one of them. I think it's figuring out like which one you're good at, and then figuring out like, not only, like you might be a good writer. The problem is there's like, it's very hard to break out like blogging, but what you have to do is stay on top of the social platforms. So you could be a good writer, and you have to find like the platform that has a lot of organic reach and figure out where in there, like your writing skills will be useful and can make you grow a little bit. So like Instagram popped off for a little while where like the long written captions were like really popular, and those got a lot of shares and views, and like in the like nutrition space, like, oh, I'm gonna write out my entire like day and inspiration and all this shit. I'm like, oh, if you're a writer, yes, this is like a picture platform, but that's where the growth is coming from. So you got to keep your eyes open, like what's natural to you, what you're doing. And also when you're starting off, like it goes back to understanding that all the feelings that you're having are like wildly normal for everybody. Like I started off, I'm just like, dude, like, I don't know if this shit is going to work out. When you started, I don't know if anyone's going to come on my podcast, if it's going to be any good. Everybody has those same feelings. They're shitty feelings to have, but you have to go through them. And once you learn from them, like you'll feel good. You'll look back and be like, yeah, of course I needed to go through those things to get to where I'm at. You also realize like it's all relative. Like your first 5 subscribers are going to feel just as good as when I hit 50,000 subscribers, right? And like, it sounds ridiculous, but it's real when you're actually in the moment.
when I first started out doing this, yeah, that's kind of how it was. Like I started out writing and I still write, but I always question, are people actually writing or reading what I'm writing? Because it's easier to consume a podcast or a video than it is to sit down and read something. So I put a poll out and the poll came back that most people just skim the article. If the player, appeals to them because they have them on their fantasy team, then they're gonna, read that section, but they're not sitting there and reading the whole thing. But at the same time, I found out people were reading my stuff when people would correct me and be like, actually, this player, this, that.
Yeah.
And then you're like,
Yeah.
oh,
We're in such an interesting space because again, people are attached to the whole blogging thing.
yeah.
Realistically, I feel like not that blogging is a waste of time, but in terms of like growth and in terms of like personal branding, really hard to grow right now within the space. It's like you're writing for the fantasy footballers, which does give you leverage because their website on its own probably gets a ton of organic like SEO coming to it. Plus you have like the leverage of, one or two of them retweeting some of your stuff sometimes, and that will gain you a following. But most people won't have that to bank on. Like if you're starting off a blog or whatever, the chances that people find your blog organically is almost none. So I get people reaching out to me all the time, like, yo, I'd love to just like blog for your website. And I'm like, I say no, but like not because you're not good enough, just because like you'd be wasting both of our time. Like one, I'm not going to read your blog post. Two, you're not going to gain just because you're like attached to my YouTube channel and blogging for my site. Like it's not going to help you in the long run. So I think like thinking about shit like that is very underrated in the space.
Because you have such a following, do you think it's important to kind of like build people up and like share their stuff too? If something is like really interesting to you, do you feel like putting it out there and helping like give them that bump is something worth doing?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's so important. I think like, and that's what I'm trying to do with like the people on my team right now. I really want them to build their own. I want them to get to a point where they're coming at me and they have leverage. They're like, Nick, I'm this important to you that I need this from you. And I have no choice but to be like, fuck, you're right. Like I'm not making this amount of money unless you're with me, or I'm not getting this many views unless you're on the podcast, shit like that. I think it's full circle. Obviously it comes back to intention. Like, of course I want to grow my friends and make sure that they have their own personal brand and they're gaining a lot of shit from it. But it works both ways when they're related to, like when they're attached to your brand and you're attached to them. I think it creates a circle of just good that continues to kind of rise up. So yeah, I mean, if you see good work, like I don't know why people are hesitant to like point out things that they admire. Like I don't always do it like publicly. I don't like to retweet shit. Normally it's not like something I would typically do, but if I have content creators that I like really admire, I think they're doing really good work, I almost always DM them. And I'm like, dude, I just want to let you know, like, I've been listening to your podcast all season. Your shit is like really good. I admire the work that you're doing. I just give them like a quick shout out. So I always try to acknowledge people that are doing good, because especially in our industry, it can be a big burnout, man. Like it's really hard to keep content up all off season through the end of the season. So it's nice to get an acknowledgement, and I think it's definitely really important to build people up.
It really is. Like people like me who have 6,000 followers or whatever, like when somebody sends us a message, they're like, hey, I saw or I listened to your podcast, or I read this article or whatever. And I really appreciate the work that you're putting out there. It makes you feel so freaking good when it's somebody that's like a bigger name guy that has a lot of followers, or a bigger name girl that has a bunch of followers. You're like, holy crap, like this person actually knows I exist.
Yeah, like you don't know the impact that shit kind of has. Like I've had people reach out to me, like some pretty big fucking names from the interview series I did, and they're like, dude, you're doing a really good job with them. And I was like, I never in a million years would have thought that person was watching or following or like cared about what I was doing. And I'm like, I'll always remember when that person did that. Like, so sending a fucking 5-word sentence to someone can change your entire perspective on that person. Like, why? What does that take from you? Like, it's such a good thing.
Oh my God. It is. You are helping so many people out by doing that. And just, and every now and then somebody will be like, hey, can you read my article and tell me what you think about it? I'm like, why do you want me to read? Like getting with the imposter syndrome. Like, why do you want me to read it?
That's a great mindset to have. Like, you keep that mindset as long as you possibly can. Cause I'm kind of like a piece of shit now, where I'm just like, I'm sorry. I don't, I want to help everybody, but like, I don't really have time. I have to try to prioritize things. But the longer that you can like really be in the grind and be in the grit with people like that, that's how you build like the really loyal following.
Well, I straight up tell them, don't ask me for advice on Sundays, because I'll be hungover and in bed till the game starts. So
dude, that was like key piece of my content. Every Sunday morning, like 3-4 years ago, I'd wake up, be hungover as shit, get on live streams, chop it up, and I'd be like, "Yo, people, stop asking." And there'd be like 1,000 people in there, just a million 6 stars. I'm like, "Stop asking me fantasy football questions." Like,
Yeah.
I'm not here to have a good time. I'm here to be hungover. Just like hang out with me for a minute. And people like low-key love that, you know?
No, for sure. Yeah. I have people DMing me. They're like, okay, I know you said last night that you were going to get trashed, but I have this question. I'm like,
Yeah.
sorry, I
It's,
missed your question, but I was not good.
it's funny when they reach out like that too, though, you know, because you make an impression that way. They're like, "Oh, this girl's like cool. She's chill. Like it is
Yeah.
what it, you know." It's funny that way.
It's part of life, you know. So that's that. But speaking of alcohol, because I touched on margaritas earlier, and I know you have a margarita tattoo, and that's pretty dope. Yeah. I got a question for you about margaritas. What is the best margarita you've ever had?
Ooh, the best margarita I've ever had might have been. I've been to Vegas one time.
Okay.
It was actually for the fantasy sports like conference that they had last winter. Went to. There's a steakhouse there. I want to say the name is STK Steakhouse. I think it's a pretty popular steak. I think they have one in New York, one in California. I don't know. Whatever. Their margarita there was fucking incredible. I might have been like kind of wasted already, so maybe like the score was a little higher based on that. I've always found that like I love margaritas when I'm already wasted, so it's probably a little bit of a cushion score. But that one sticks out to me like really, really well. There's also a place in New York, down in like the Lower East Side called the Pineapple Club. They just opened up like pre-COVID, and they make all of their drinks like freshly made. The shit is like marinating overnight. I don't know how you marinate a margarita, but everything was incredible, and their margarita was amazing.
Sweet. Have you ever gotten sick to a point off of margarita that you were like, I'm never going to have one again? Or are you one of those guys that's like, I'm a champ, I'm going to drink them. I know I'm not lying to myself.
I've never gotten to the point where like I'm never going to drink them again, but like for the night I've cut myself off before. Sometimes if I get into like the frozen margaritas where I'm like I down a whole cup of a frozen marg, I'm like this is fucking a little bit too much. As I've gotten a little bit older too, like I can't strictly get drunk off of margaritas because drinking like 8 of them will absolutely murder you the next morning. You'll wake up in a fucking coffin. So no, I don't think there'll ever be a point where I get like too. I just like tequila is like easily my liquor of choice, so I'll never be able to pivot off of that.
I was going to ask you if you were a tequila fan. I can't do it. The last time I took a shot at tequila, I almost threw up immediately. And it's just like your brain goes back to a certain day and you're like, I told myself I'd never do this again.
Tequila is like, I love loving tequila because it's like the drink where a lot of people just don't like the shots of tequila, but it's one of those like fun drinks where you could always peer pressure people into taking it. You're like, you're not going to not take a shot at tequila. Like if it was like whiskey or something like hard, I'm just like, dude, I don't really like fuck with whiskey too much, but like tequila is like fun, like party mode. You're like, you're going to take the shot at tequila with me. And it works every time.
I mean, it was my birthday, I think, the last time that I took one. So it was pre-COVID. It was like right on that cusp. So we were out like
your ass will be I bet you'll take some tequila shots when we're done with COVID.
Like, I probably take a lot of shots when I've been taking a lot of shots now because of
it won't be hard to convince people once we're done with COVID to take
no, you know, everybody's like, I'm going to save money now. I don't go out. I don't go to the bars and spend money, but bitch, you are buying alcohol and bringing it home. We have Drizzly here. I don't know if you guys have alcohol. Yeah, I'm like, the guy doesn't even ask for ID anymore. He's like, I've been to this house like 3 times. Sweet.
They just like drop it off at my apartment. They never ask for an ID to begin with.
I was doing the podcast last night and I was talking to some guy, and I'm sure I say some guy. I was talking to my friend Troy, who's an up and coming guy in the fantasy football industry.
I know of Troy.
Yeah, he's a really rad guy. He's super nice. And so like I'm over here like, fuck, damn shit, you know. But I had a Drizzly order coming like while I was talking to him, and my wife was going to answer the door. But we have a sign down there that says don't ring the doorbell because of the dogs. So the guy's like texting me like 12 times about that Drizzly order. I'm like, Troy, I'm listening to you.
Fucking leave it outside. Yeah.
I told him, I said, dude, just leave it. Like, you've been here. And he's like, all right, fine. But yeah, that's funny to me. But the margarita thing, I like it. That's part of your brand, though, right? People think when they hear margarita and fantasy football in the same sentence, you're the first person they think of, right?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean,
or like margaritas and fantasy football. I don't know, but if there was one, it'd be you.
I hope so. That's a brand I'd be very proud of. Yeah.
So I know another thing I have to bring up because I don't like. I already told you this before you came on, that I don't know as much about you as I probably should, just because like people have brought you up on this podcast and I knew of you, but not so much your content. And then once I got into it, I kind of got in like a hole, you get in YouTube holes. It's pretty easy to do with your stuff. And I know you say, there's a word that you say when,
Bike.
yes, bike. Are
Welcome
you a
bike.
Flies fan or what's
Welcome bike. Nah, it's just like it's something me and my friends used to say like a
yeah,
long time ago. We've always said the word bike. I don't know
yeah,
why. And it means like back,
right.
BACK. Like, it's a substitute for that. And I
It's
just
dope.
started using the beginning of my videos. I would just be like, welcome bike, and I'd start using it throughout. People were like, why
Yeah.
the fuck is he saying bike? What does bike mean? And just, and now you hear it. It's more, it actually came from like hip hop culture. It was something
Yeah.
that was like said in hip hop culture. And it was
Yeah.
just like something me and my friends found funny. But like most people, like Twitter is basically fantasy football. Twitter is like the opposite of hip hop culture. So people they have no fucking idea what I'm talking about when I say things like that. So now when it's getting a little bit more popular, the word bike, but like, when people like Bleacher Report used it in one of their tweets the other day, and I got mentioned in it like 6,000 times. They're like,
Yeah.
dude, they stole it from you. I'm like, bro, I didn't create that shit. It's just like y'all just don't know anything about like culture, really,
Well, yeah, I told my wife, it was so funny. I was like, hey, I'm gonna be interviewing this guy who says bike a lot, right? And I don't really know why he does. And so she's like, I'm gonna Google it. So she Googled it and she's like, oh, hip hop. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
yeah. But it's just really funny to have my wife tell me, oh yeah, hip hop. Like, how do you know more than me? Like, Google is the end all be all of finding things. So
yeah. It's just like a stupid fucking word that I say all the time.
it's like your brand now too. That's another thing, right? It's something that sticks out and people know you. I see people that are commenting on your like either tweeting to you or like on your YouTube and stuff, and they use it.
Yeah,
So
like we're so bike. Yeah, I love that. I fucking that
it's so dope because like,
drives me
like
up.
the footballers have like 55 and stuff. I know that when you were interviewing them, you brought that up, and like it's really cool that if you have a catchphrase that people can kind of grasp onto. I
Yeah,
guess
it's got to be like natural too. When you start
yeah,
trying to force that shit, it's like kind of awkward and weird. But if it's something that's natural that just happens over a long period of time, like
yeah.
that will become part of what you're doing and your brand, I guess.
And I was telling my wife too. I was like, I don't think I could remember to like change the word out when I'm talking. You say it just so naturally. I'm
Bike,
like,
yeah.
damn, talent right there. There's your hidden talent. So, before we close it up, I just want to talk a little bit about like personal life versus like being in the fantasy football industry. How do you find time to balance like your personal life and the work that you have to do as well?
Yeah, I mean, definitely when I started this, it was difficult. There were definitely sacrifices I had to make. Like, I was like, I wanted to wake up Saturday and Sunday sometimes, and I needed to have my mind straight. I needed to make sure I wasn't hungover. I didn't need to stay out late. I needed to sleep. And there are personal sacrifices you need to make. Like there are legitimately like relationships that I haven't been able to get into or had to like end
Yeah.
because I am very focused and I put my energy towards the goals that I'm chasing after right now.
Mhm.
And I can't like promise that to another person or anyone else because this is what I'm committed to right now. So I would say it's a lot of sacrifice, but I've gotten better as I've grown a little bit. And I think like outsourcing has been one of the key things to my friends that help me with content and to the editors that help me with this video stuff. Outsourcing to them is not always like I'm fortunate to have been able to create this mixture of my personal life and my work life kind of together. Sometimes like when I outsource stuff for what people would consider my work, which I consider everything in my life, like if I'm like, I need you to start editing these videos, it's not always because like I need to spend that hour emailing fucking business executives or whatever it is. Sometimes it's just like I need that hour to like relax or recharge. Sometimes I need that hour to go out with my friends and grab a drink or go on a date or like do X, Y, or Z. So I've been able to outsource things and also like not really judge myself on what I do to keep my energy up. Like what I do in my personal life, I understand reflects back to my bike, to my business life.
There you go. Well, it's one of those
Circle,
kind of full circle. Yes, but I mean, I get that. And I talk to people and prior to even this podcast, just one of the reasons I think I started this podcast was to kind of help people out with like balancing their family life and being a part of the fantasy industry because it is grueling and it is time consuming. And there are people that have families with lots of kids and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, how you're on a podcast every day? I don't
Like,
understand.
don't get it fucking twisted. It's a lot of work. Like
Yeah.
when you're starting off, here's the thing, like you actually have to work as if you know, whatever your goal is, if you want this shit to be your full-time thing, you can't work half time expecting it to become a full-time thing. Like, you need to be working just as hard as the people that are working at it full-time before it's your full-time thing. Like, you can't like make it into a fairy tale. Like, that's the practicality of it. So when I started this shit, like, yeah, I was working 12, 13, 14 hours a day on this stuff. And like, my fucking eyes hurt at the end of the day because I was looking at my computer screen all day. You have to find ways to cope with that or push through that and understand it's not forever, but it is a part of doing it in today's world. And you could find shortcuts. And that's where being savvy in social and being savvy in like marketing and branding yourself becomes important, because it's less time you have to spend doing those 12-hour days and shit like that.
It's dope. Yes, great advice. I'm still trying to learn how to balance stuff, and I don't do this full time at all. But you know, just life in general comes at you real fast. Ferris
Yeah.
Bueller.
Yeah, I mean, like listen, it's different for everybody. It's really dependent on what your goal is. Some people just do this for an outlet. Some people do it for fun. Some people do it because it's truly their passion, and it's a way to get away from the shit that they hate in their regular work. And that's cool. If that's like all the outlet you need, perfect. Like, don't overwork yourself on something that you love, because then you're going to start hating it. And it's like, fuck, now I need an outlet from the outlet I had originally. But if you're in this for like the long haul, understand that you've got to have short-term sacrifices in order to like achieve the long-term stuff.
Yep. I agree. Speaking of something fun, because you were talking about fun, I've watched one of the videos. I watched the live draft that you had from 2019, where you had all the homies come, to the Airbnb, and you guys did all that.
Yeah.
Like, how dope was that? And then what kind of advice do you have for people who want to like do something like that once all this pandemic stuff goes away, but they like want to have a live draft like that? They want to bring people in from all over the place.
Yeah, that was pretty fucking wild, actually. That's probably one of the things, if not the thing I'm most proud about that we've done as a brand. For anyone listening, like, basically it was just, we had 10 or 11 of my subscribers on YouTube fly out from all over the country. We had like dudes, California, fucking Texas, Minnesota, all over the place. And we got an Airbnb in New York City. We chilled for the weekend. We had our fantasy draft on like the Saturday. And the rest of the time was just like spent hanging out, getting to know each other, going out, partying, doing a lot of shit. That was really difficult to plan, to get the logistics behind. The first year so that was the second year we did it. I think probably the one that you watched was the second year. We've done it 2 years.
Yeah.
The first year was really fucking hard because I had no idea how to plan it. I had no idea, like, I need to make sure like the dudes that were coming weren't like super weird, and that like it would make for a good weekend, like I need to have people that I could get along with so that I wouldn't have to worry about a bunch of like nonsense going on. I think like live events are fucking super cool. One, you get to meet the people that are following you the closest, because the people that are going to come to those live events, people that are going to pay to fly out and pay for that entirety of the weekend, are the people that like love you the most, like that's cool to fucking meet them. Two, like, we're able to make it into a awesome piece of content that again portrays the lifestyle part of what we're building. Like, you get to know me better getting a video of like us hanging out for the weekend. You feel like, again, like, the person, like you're friends with the person. So very hard. Live events are really, really, really underrated, both from a content sense, like a brand sense, but also underrated in terms of like how hard it is to make it happen. I would say for people looking to do that, that's where brand comes into play. Like, you need to have a really fucking passionate, loyal following in order for people to want to do that. And I think that's like a gut feeling. It's like, do you know that the people that follow you like really love you? Can you pull that shit off? And I almost held it off for like another year. I was scared to do it. I was like, what if people don't sign? Like, back to the imposter syndrome. Like, what if I don't get enough people that want to do the league or sign up for it? And one of my friends was like, dude, shut the fuck up, and you're going to do it this year, and it's going to be good, and then you're going to continue doing it. And we did it that year, the first year. Tons of problems. We had like fucking people waking up all over New York City. We had fucking puke. Like, it was nonsense. It was amazing. A lot of the shit we left off camera that like you would imagine what would probably happen that weekend. But for the most part, so fucking cool, and something I'm really proud of, because nobody else in the space does that shit. And I really think like with that piece of content, we can make that into one of like the more exclusive fantasy leagues in, on the internet. Like, I think people are going to be like, yo, this is fucking really cool that he brings the subscribers together for this. And it's a piece of content that gets a shitload of views. So it's like, it's popular and it's engaging and it's very relatable, really, in a sense.
That's so cool. I like watching that. I just felt like, man, I wish I could do something like that. That's so dope. And I totally get the whole getting drunk in New York and ending up somewhere you're like don't know.
Yeah. Also, like I have to caveat by saying like that's also that was also like my lifestyle, like being
Yeah,
drunk in Manhattan for like a full weekend from the ages of like 22 to 24. So it wasn't very difficult for me to like plan that and be like, this is what's going to happen. Cause I've already done that exact weekend with my friends, like 24,000 times, you know?
for sure.
So yeah, I think it's going back to like what value you provide. Like, I'm just like, this is me. I'll be able to show them a good time. And that's great. And some people would be like, I want to do a retreat that's like based around fitness, or you know,
Right.
we're gonna have a good weekend where we like clear our minds. It's like a meditation thing. That could also be fantasy football, but it goes back to like the connection that you have with your audience, you know?
And that's cool. Yeah, because I know people that fly out to Vegas to do live drafts and people that go camping and people who do this and do that. And so super rad. And you were talking earlier about going to that conference in Vegas. How was it being around people that like maybe you looked up to, or people that just have like a business mindset that you kind of maybe not model yourself after, but people that you like respect in the industry?
Yeah, it was pretty wild being there. I will say though, I didn't actually go to the conference. Like
Yeah.
the season ended, and I was like, I kind of need to like get out of where I was. I was like, I need to travel a little bit. I'm so burnt out from the season.
Hmm.
So me and my friends were kind of like traveling. I went to like Florida first, and then we were in um, New Orleans for the national championship game,
Dope.
and then we went to Vegas. I just went for one night because I only actually went because um, one of the companies I work with was like there, and they're like, if you're going to the conference, like I'll meet you. And I was like, oh, I'm already kind of traveling, so like I'll just go there for a night. And it happened to be the night that they were doing the conference. So I got there, and like I wasn't really allowed in the conference because I wasn't an attendee of the conference.
Hmm.
But like the footballer Andy was there, and I was like, yo, just come like lift the curtain for me real quick so I could like slide right in. And of course he did that. So like really cool to hang out with them and meet some of the dudes that I just only interact with from like Twitter and stuff. But again, like it's not like always my like cup of tea there. Like I don't know like how much I really relate to. I shouldn't even say that because I had a great fucking time. Like I met a lot of awesome people there that like I never would have thought I'd be like cool hanging out with. And like, you know, I took tequila shots with like Brad Evans while we were there, and like I met a bunch of people that I otherwise wouldn't have networked with. So yeah, it's pretty wild meeting people. Like I was right next to like Matt Berry at the bar. I was like, this is fucking weird, but also crazy and cool. So it's kind of like a surreal experience in a sense.
That's dope. I went to the Dallas fantasy football convention that they had going on back in the day when it was a actual thing. And yeah, I met the footballers there. Brad Evans, we both missed our Scott Fishbowl pick because we both got intoxicated that night in different places. So
Love that.
Liz Lowe's is like one of my really good friends, and I met her there. Like that shit's
Dope. Yeah.
so cool to like network like that too. Like what's the importance of networking? What do you think? Like being able to have other people in the same industry that kind of have your back and vice versa, and you can, you know, jump on with them, they can jump on with you, or help each other out. All that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's important depending, I think, on like what you're, I guess, trying to do. Like it's not a bad, again, like I look at this a little differently. Depending on like where you're trying to go in the industry. If your goal is to like grow and you want appearances on different podcasts and stuff, of course, it's always going to be important networking. I like the networking portion of it because I get to talk about like growing a business in this space with people who have already done it and have more experience than me and can give me advice. So yeah, I mean, networking is, of course, it's important in every aspect of life, but depending on how you tailor it to yourself, it's going to be kind of different in this industry.
And talking about tailoring things to yourself, if you are the type of person that wants to grow your brand and you want to have, you know, a following and have, I see it all the time. People either asking, you know, I need to get to 5,000 followers. I want to get to 6,000, 7,000 followers. And then other people that are like, I don't really care about my follower count, but they want to grow their brand and they want to be big and stuff. Do you think follower count does matter, or do you think it's something that you shouldn't really pay attention to?
Uh, as much as I want to say and be like non-materialistic, like, yeah, that shit doesn't matter. It does matter because it moves the needle for certain things. Like it gives you a level of authority when you're trying to get things done. It gives you a level of like credibility. But I also think if like doing the right things are what end up getting you to those numbers. You know what I mean? It's not like I feel like the people that do end up getting to the subscriber counts that you're trying to get to don't get there because they're trying to, right? Like those things will take you there. So I think like really good intent will always be the place that gets you there. But we're all like human. Like I'm always looking at the next goal when it comes to like numbers and subscribers. But I know I'm going to get there not because I want to get to a certain number of subscribers, but because I'm doing X, Y, Z, and I'm doing them the right way, and I'm working hard in order to get there. So it's like following and looking at the numbers, it's pointless because when you get there, it doesn't actually fucking do anything for you. But it's more so like a good teller to yourself. Like, okay, it's like an acceptance of the market in a sense.
So do you go back at your videos and like look at the statistics from them, like what got the most views, what was this, what was that, and kind of tailor what you're going to put out based on what does well and what doesn't hit?
Rarely. I've done it a little bit more just because I've noticed like some videos will do really astronomically high numbers compared to like the average things. So I'm like, okay, I need to make sure that I do like these 3 videos in the summer at this time. But typically, again, like I'm not a very analytical person when it comes to like tactics like that. I just, again, like trying to do what I feel is right at the time that I feel it's right to do it. But like I'll once in a while I'll look back and be like, okay, we need to do this and this and this at this time. But that's never like the driving force.
And when you do something like a podcast or whatever, what is the importance of people actually rating and reviewing those podcasts? Because I know that people just listen, and a lot of the times they don't do that.
Yeah, that's like I don't know. Like I don't really know. I just know like we're supposed to fucking say it, and like obviously the more ratings you have, the more reviews you have, the more thumbs up you get on YouTube. Like I assume that like more thumbs up means the more people that they're gonna show the video to, right? Like it says that like okay, the average YouTube viewer in fantasy football likes this video. Let's show it to more people that haven't seen it yet. So I would assume there's a level of engagement, but like these platforms, YouTube and Apple and whatever. They just hide these things very well. So like we're never really going to know. We just assume that like positive engagement is positive engagement, and there's not really much you can do to kind of to game the system in that sense. I hate like I really am avidly against people doing like, oh, we're doing a giveaway like we're going to give away a hat for if you tag 3 people, follow these 3 accounts and like retweet all our shit. I'm like, that's fine. But like deep down, I'm like, I hate that. I just straight up, I just fucking hate like gimmicky shit like that.
Yeah. I do a pizza thing for a follower count, but like I don't keep up with it or anything. I'm like, when I get to a start, I bought a pizza for somebody one time, but it was right when COVID started, and I was like, you know what? I actually want to help like delivery drivers and shit out. So
no, that's like fucking cool. Like I think every once in a while it plays, especially like if it's on brand, like something like that. But like people do that. That's like their main form of like trying to grow. Like that's their plan, And I'm like, that's such a faulty way of thinking about things,
No, for sure. I get that. And you might get somebody to subscribe to your YouTube or your podcast or whatever, but are they going to continue to listen? And chances are not,
Yeah, those are so like those kind of contests and things like that, they're empty. Like it's cool to see, 8,000 retweets on a single tweet, but like 8,000 retweets equal what? 1 follower, $1? Like what's your goal there,
Yeah, you don't really yeah. And I can see where people come from when they do that, like, trying to engage it. And some people do stick around because they're like, "Oh, that's cool. You guys do contests. You guys do this. Guys do that." If it's on your brand, then yeah, sure. If that's your thing and you're doing it out of the kindness of your heart and not trying to get personal gain because of it, then that's dope. But I'm not gonna go spending money on a jersey.
Yeah. I mean, there's a time and place for everything. That's just like one of the things in our industry I notice like all the time is like a main trying to grow your shit. I'm just like, that's I hate it,
Yeah, I get that. I'm so happy that you came on with me because, like I said, people were bringing you up like crazy on here. Like the second episode of this podcast, my homie Gabe was on it, and we were talking brand like constantly the whole entire thing. And I was like, I should just title this episode "Brand." And he's like, "Well, if you do that, you have to credit Nick." And I was like, "Who?" And then I was like, I gotta go look this dude up and like really get to know what he's about. So, like, you encompass everything that I want this podcast to be about. And I know that you had a podcast similar to this. Matt Harmon has had something with Backyard Banter. I just think it's really important to get the word out to people that are up and coming that like they can do it.
100%, man. They can do it. Look at we have such a wide variety of people doing it.
For sure.
There's no
Yeah.
excuse not to do it. You all got to fucking work hard. That's really what it comes down to. Have good intent, work really fucking hard, and be smart about how you're working.
I really appreciate you coming on. Like, this was like my Brad Evans moment where I'm like, oh my God, fangirl. So, before we go, can you just let everybody know like where they can find your stuff, what you got going on, and all that jazz?
Yeah, you could find me on YouTube. It's just my name, Nick Ercolano, Ercolano. On Twitter, if you want to come yell at me, don't ask me any sit-start questions. Actually, by the time y'all probably listen to this, sit-starts will be out of the way. At Nick_BDGE. So Twitter and YouTube are pretty much my things, and that's where I'll be kind of keeping y'all up to date with everything throughout the offseason.
Super rad, super rad. You guys go check his stuff out, and we will be back next week. I hope you guys have a great whatever month, whatever day, whatever year this is. Have fun whenever you're listening. Evergreen content. Adios.